On a calm and ordinary day like any other, people were trading items on the street while the protagonist walked leisurely, listening to Metallica on his headphones. No one expected that. Suddenly, a light would begin to appear, and that day would be remembered forever. People started panicking, asking if it was an earthquake, as an energy began to engulf the entire city. The protagonist tried to understand what was happening, and suddenly noticed something. The ground began to rise abruptly, and the entire city was transported into a kind of box, surrounded by mysterious lights. People wondered what on earth was happening, and the protagonist, in shock, thought it might be dimensional transportation or some form of transmigration, things he often read about in novels and webtoons. Out of nowhere, system windows began appearing to everyone, announcing that the game had begun and each person needed to roll a die. This left the protagonist even more confused, wondering what it all meant. But as they looked up, many people noticed something falling. A massive cube was heading toward the city, and the protagonist quickly realized it was an enormous die, crashing with great force onto the city's glass ceiling. Then, the system alerted that pawn number 08 would move 3 spaces because the die showed the number 3, and immediately the city, now pawn number 8, began to move 3 spaces, leaving everyone terrified by the sudden movement, still unable to comprehend what was truly happening. Unlike the others, the protagonist quickly realized they had been summoned into a game. However, in this case, they weren't the players. They were the pawns in the game. Looking down, he reflected, probably the players were the ones rolling the dice to move the pawns, and in fact, the entire city was the pawn chosen by some player. But if the player only needed a pawn, they could have just summoned the city. So, he wondered why everyone had been summoned along with the city. Suddenly, another system window appeared saying, "You have reached a defensive space. Setting difficulty and defense time, please roll your die." The difficulty was level 1. The defense time was 3 days. Invoking map. Suddenly, a new box with another environment began to emerge and soon connected with the city, leaving the citizens completely bewildered until the system announced, "The defense mission will begin shortly," leaving everyone worried. The system also announced that if all 4 bases were destroyed, it would be considered game over. Soon the bases were identified, and the system warned that in the event of game over, the pawn would be exterminated, terrifying everyone even further. People began screaming desperately, begging to return to normal, while the protagonist calmly removed his headphones, thinking it made no sense to panic because, if communication was necessary, someone would have talked to them from the start. Then he noticed something. Another window informed that basic equipment would be provided to the civilians, which made him think that the best thing to do now was to focus on the system's announcements. Soon it was announced that all citizens had to roll their respective dice. Then, a sphere with many numbers began to be distributed. The system explained that Class 100 was mythical, 99 to 95 legendary, 94 to 81 heroic, and so on, down to the common class, which was between 60 and 1. The protagonist was surprised by the 100-sided die, but suddenly, a man in a suit started shouting that something was heading toward them. Looking ahead, they could see something approaching, but only silhouettes, until they finally realized it was actually a legion of monsters. Panic quickly spread as everyone began screaming for help, but the monsters were already very close, advancing rapidly. Upon arriving, they began attacking all the civilians in sight, while some tried to flee. Suddenly, one of the monsters reached the protagonist, and after preparing an attack with a club, struck him cruelly, sending him flying far away. And still in midair, he finally concludes that humans are actually necessary to protect the pawn, and even though he falls violently in the middle of the street, he understands that they must protect the city to move toward the goal. This is a dice game of beings who could be gods or demons. After the deadly attack delivered by the monster, he pauses for a moment, not even realizing someone was approaching from behind. Suddenly, a spear is thrust into the ground, causing a massive explosion behind the monsters, which immediately turn around. Then, another even bigger explosion occurs, wiping out the nearby monsters. Even the injured citizens look back to see what's happening, and in disbelief, they realize the monsters were killed instantly, wondering who that woman is. She is actually Hyeju, currently at level 1 and of the common citizen class. She wields a weapon called Fang of the Prominence of the Empyrean Flame Dragon, a legendary class spear that allows the user to borrow the power of the Empyrean Flame Dragon. Hyeju starts shouting, asking all the injured to run to Namsan Tower, as the military and police are already forming a defensive line. She also urges everyone to roll the dice as quickly as possible. Holding the spherical dice in their hands, they question why but quickly roll them after Hyeju explains that by rolling the dice, they will receive equipment based on the number they roll. Those who get common class equipment must retreat, but those with magical class equipment or higher must help. Quickly, they begin to drop their respective items, still confused by everything, but decide to follow her instructions because Hyeju is bravely fighting the monsters. And it was on this day that the ordinary lives of each of those citizens were stripped away and replaced by extraordinary ones. On the first day of the new year, countless lives were lost, and many heroes were born. And our protagonist, Choi Yul, at level 1 and of the common citizen class, there at the 8th pawn, became someone who would soon be recognized as the worst scum of all by others. For when he rolled the dice, he got the number 100 and received a mythical class magical text called Demon King of Sovereignty, the Book of Krasina, which grants permission to use the library of the Demon King Krasina, the one who desires everything and nothing, allowing the user to access all kinds of information, such as the location of items, secret events, monster information, maps, and objectives as soon as the mission begins. Suddenly the book starts to float and emit a strange energy as the system informs that, despite everything, Krasina is an incarnation with a monopolistic desire. Thus, all rewards that survivors earn using knowledge from his text will go to the owner of Krasina's book. 3 hours into the defense mission, there have already been 3,102 casualties and 7,023 injuries, as well as 1 destroyed base, while Hyeju continues to eliminate every monster she can until she pauses for a moment, visibly tired, and asks if it's over. The excited citizens reply that they've won and managed to survive as a military truck approaches from behind, braking sharply near them. Soldiers quickly disembark, announcing they are from the Korean army and asking injured civilians to board the truck as they will be evacuated to Namsan Tower. One of the soldiers approaches Hyeju and salutes her, saying she did a hard job there, to which she humbly replies it was nothing. The soldier's name is Kwon Jae-young, also of the common citizen class and level 1, and he possesses Helden's Helm, a heroic class item that provides unshakable faith, preventing the user from entering states of confusion, fear, or disorientation. Kwon tells Hyeju that thanks to the time she bought them, the army and police were able to organize. She then asks if everything is over, but he replies that phone calls and the internet are down, so it's difficult to assess the current situation. He comments that they are using shortwave radios to establish communication, so they should soon receive reports about each location. Then, Kwon calls her to go to Namsan Tower, which she accepts, but suddenly, someone yells no. It's the protagonist, saying it's not over yet. Completely injured, he says the boss will appear soon, explaining that it's written in the book along with the mission information, details about the monster, and the current progress. Everything is written there. He then shows the book to Kwon and Hyeju, but when they look at it, they only see blank pages. While the protagonist wonders if he's the only one who can see the book's content, Hyeju asks the soldier if that is some kind of manual only Choi can see, and the soldier responds that it must be some kind of information book. Kwon reflects that if that's true, Choi has a very OP item, because information is power. He then asks the protagonist if he can give more details, as he needs proof about the book's content. Choi then starts talking about Kwon's helmet, which is a heroic class item belonging to a set with a total of 6 pieces, and the user is Sergeant Kwon Jae-young, with 21 days left until his discharge, leaving the soldier shocked to learn that the item is part of a set. He then talks about Hyeju, saying she possesses a legendary class weapon called Fang of the Prominence of the Imperial Flame Dragon, and surprisingly, her favorite song to sing at karaoke is Poker Face by Lady Gaga. Immediately, she becomes embarrassed and tells him to stop, while the sergeant thinks she has good musical taste. Extremely flustered, she thinks that's a secret, and comments that the book really contains even personal information, and Kwon adds that the book is a data book, which makes him think that the boss really is coming. The sergeant then says the item's ability has been confirmed, so he will contact HQ and asks them to wait a bit. Meanwhile, someone reflects that if that world were a game, it would probably be a system error, because the problems there are too easy for him. This person is sitting surrounded by board games and comments that, for that reason, they made him this way, so he can't go out into the world, as if the operator had found a bug and isolated it. And if the day comes when he can go out into the world, back in the city, someone calls for Choi, surprising him. It's Kwon, informing him that he has HQ's permission and that they will take a gamble, as there is no better plan or time to waste, so they will trust the information he provided. The protagonist listens attentively and in silence. Then the sergeant hands him the shortwave radio, asking him to provide as much information and as many countermeasures as possible, which Choi agrees to. Quickly, he starts speaking into the radio, asking if anyone can hear him, and says that from that moment on, he will talk about the defense mission. He explains that the mission is a defensive type, so they need to defend the bases against waves of monsters that appear every 6 hours. At the end of each wave, the boss appears. In that case, it's a two-headed ogre, level 1, that uses both close combat and magic simultaneously. The protagonist explains that they will win if they can protect the base 4 times a day, 12 times over 3 days, and defeat the boss of the monster wave. He emphasizes that he has all the information about the mission and that if they use that data to create a strategy, they can survive. After that, he will search for a way to return to the original world. Those words affect Haeju, who, looking at Choi, reflects that, besides thinking about the mission, he is also planning what will happen next. After explaining everything on the radio, the protagonist announces that they will begin. I should have double-checked back then. The protagonist thinks he missed something while he was unconscious. The information about the item, Krasina's book. In the book, it was written, 08, the sacrifice of sovereignty defense, level 1, 3 days. He remembers the words, monopolizes all the rewards of those with whom the information was shared, and reflects that the scope of sharing does not only include the people who directly heard the information from him, but also includes people who heard it from others, or who heard rumors and similar things. In other words, any and all information that starts with Choi. So everyone is ready to face the boss, who begins advancing mercilessly, with a sword in one hand and a staff in the other. Immediately, Kwon starts shooting while the protagonist gives instructions, landing multiple shots directly on the monster's head. And Haeju, after preparing herself, charges at an incredible speed and attacks the monster with her spear, creating a massive explosion and tearing the ogre in half, leaving her surprised. Unable to believe she defeated the ogre so easily, she looks at the sergeant and Choi, who gives her a thumbs up while Kwon reports over the radio that the first wave is over. Then, the young Haeju gives them a thumbs up back with a smile on her face. The Demon King of Sovereignty, Krasina, asleep and chained, receives information about Pawn 8, where the total population is 193,256. The Demon King opens his eyes and notices that the records of sovereignty sacrifices are 176,542, meaning 91% of the population was registered as a sacrifice in a single day. And that was the beginning of Krasina's sins, which would continue until the very last moment of that game. A defensive mission is like a tower defense game. Monsters walk toward the bases they need to destroy, and players produce forces to stop them. So first, they must shoot the monsters with long-range weapons capable of covering a wide area, and while the first weapons used are reloading, they should use the second wave of attacks with other long-range weapons. After all, difficulty level 1 monsters are not intelligent, so they can be lured in the desired direction, and if they are injured as much as possible, the monsters will scatter. Then, groups formed by people with high-level equipment will eliminate all the monsters. After enduring a few waves and preparing for another, the protagonist requests over the radio to maintain general order in a specific location where more people will be needed. Choi begins to reflect on the fact that Krasina's book updates all information about the current situation in real time. If he merely thinks about the information he wants to know and turns the page, the information automatically appears in the book. In a sort of control center, he starts coordinating the entire action, giving instructions on which equipment to use for support and detailing when and where the monsters will arrive. He thinks that if they can organize themselves, everyone there can survive. Moments later, in the middle of the city, Pawn 8, the attack against the monsters resumes. Sergeant Kwon orders the third squad to inspect the area, while another soldier reports the situation to the protagonist. Suddenly, Kwon pauses to reflect and realizes that, in the beginning, the headquarters had the final say after considering what Choi had suggested, but now it seems that Choi Yul himself is in command. The sergeant then takes a deep breath and recalls the protagonist's words, saying he only had information in the book. He wonders if commanding an entire city was a skill Choi already had, or if it was also a skill granted by Krasina's book. When the sergeant snaps back to reality, he finds himself silently staring at the protagonist, who, upon calling him, says he is almost finished. Kwon asks if the boss of the last wave is coming, and Choi confirms, but tells him not to worry, as Haeju will destroy it completely. Meanwhile, Haeju is being transported in a truck, resting, until she suddenly wakes up startled to see a giant stone boss right in front of her, chasing the truck she is in. The name of this boss is Billy, a giant who was born weak and was therefore abandoned by his own kind. He is enormous but lacks combat power. In the truck, the protagonist is glad that Haeju has woken up, while she yells, trying to understand what is happening. The sergeant informs them that they just ran out of flares, as they used the last one to try to stop the boss. Even so, the giant delivers a powerful punch, but misses the target. Hyeju is startled by the impact and, still lost, wonders what the hell that was, while Choi explains that they are heading outside because the bases would be destroyed in the blink of an eye if they went to the city. He comments that luckily, Billy's movement speed is slow, and he is not very resistant to any element. With that, they could defeat him if they kept attacking non-stop. Looking around, Hyeju notices that it's just the two of them there, but the protagonist responds that he wasn't talking about them. He says he was only referring to her, leaving Hyeju in shock. Meanwhile, the boss continues approaching, and the girl, preparing her spear, asks what she should do. Choi starts reading the book and explains that there is a hidden feature in items above heroic class. If certain conditions are met, the spear's shape can change, or a hidden ability will activate. The system provides the 3 necessary conditions, and the protagonist says that to discover its function, they need to fulfill them. To reassure them, he highlights that the book lists all the conditions of all items. Sometime later, under a beautiful sunset, Hyeju prepares for the attack. A bit nervous, she asks Choi if he's sure, and as the monster tries to attack her, he asks her to trust what he says. Quickly, she prepares a strike, saying she will try even though she doesn't feel confident, until unexpectedly, she uses the spear to attack herself, piercing and driving the spear through her own stomach. Meanwhile, the monster raises its arms to attack and delivers a powerful double punch exactly where she was, causing a colossal impact. Observing the scene, the sergeant grows uneasy, but Choi assures him she's fine. Soon, a light begins to emit around the giant, leading Choi to conclude that all conditions have been fulfilled. Suddenly, a strong energy starts to emerge from under the monster's hands, and an immense fire dragon rises as the system announces that the hidden ability of the Fang of Prominence is being activated. Kwon and Choi are completely stunned as they watch the dragon, which begins preparing an energy strike and quickly unleashes the attack, causing absurd destruction throughout the area, resulting in an explosion visible for miles. Sergeant Kwon, impressed, reflects that such an ability would have been disastrous had they been in the city. Watching the protagonist conversing with Hyeju, he concludes that the real danger is Choi Yul's book. Soon, the system announces that they have completed the defense mission, and that citizens outside the city will be transferred back inside. While the people celebrate the victory, the system notifies that rewards will be given to the surviving citizens, and displays a screen reporting that the mission has been completed, earning 300 points. But due to a base being destroyed, they lost 25%, resulting in 225 points. The system also announces individual rewards based on each person's contribution rate, which will be delivered after the calculations. The population, once confused, now realizes that they are truly in a game. The system also displays a point shop that is opened, offering various services such as healing, equipment, and other items, leaving people, even those injured, happy to have survived. After looking at the shop and checking the healing items, a responsible nurse asks everyone to choose healing first. While everyone follows her recommendation, the protagonist feels relieved, thinking that now the injured will be okay. But suddenly, he notices something, and both Choi, Hyeju, and Kwon are shocked to realize that everyone is without reward points, because they were taken due to the sovereignty sacrifice effect. This leaves everyone irritated and incredulous, demanding explanations about what the sovereignty sacrifice is, and asking for their points back because lives were being lost. Hyeju asks Choi what's going on, but he replies that he doesn't know either, and decides to check the book to find out what that sacrifice was. Then the system explains that the sovereignty sacrifice sacrifices 10% of the citizens, doubling the rewards, 20% triples the rewards, and if 90% are sacrificed, the rewards increase by 100 times. Suddenly, everyone begins receiving notifications from the system announcing the mission's top point earners. In third place is Yoon-seok, in second Seong-won, and in first place, Choi Yul. Everyone is incredulous and starts glaring at the protagonist, confronting him and asking why he has so many points, suggesting that the sovereignty sacrifice is related to him. Choi tries to defend himself, saying he knew nothing about that feature. The sergeant asks everyone to calm down, saying they need to treat the injured first. He suggests that perhaps the points can be exchanged or donated, and asks Choi to share them unless he intentionally took the points. The protagonist promptly says he will share the points immediately, but when he tries, he realizes there is a passive ability called the Demon King's Monopolistic Desire, which prevents Christina from allowing the sharing or donation of items or points. This leaves him confused, wondering what kind of ability that was, while people continue to insult him, demanding he return the points. The protagonist decides to try buying healing items to share with the people, but once again receives a message denying the attempt. Frustrated, he throws the book to the ground and asks Hyeju to burn it. Without hesitation, she strikes the book with her spear and flame powers. After that, Choi tries to interact with the system, believing he has destroyed the book, but when he looks back, he sees it is intact. This sends him into a rage, screaming uncontrollably, while Kwon and Hyeju merely watch. Suddenly, Choi notices a man running and yelling, begging him to transfer 10 points, while another, carrying his partner in his arms, pleads for her to hold on. True chaos and revolt erupt against Choi. Meanwhile, the sergeant receives information that the number of casualties is rising and the citizens are furious, but he remains calm, simply observing. The protagonist, desperate, searches for a solution in the book, thinking there must be a way to fix the situation. But suddenly, he feels someone place the barrel of a gun against the back of his neck. It was Kwon, saying enough was enough and that he was doing it for the greater good. The sergeant places the protagonist under arrest, while Hyeju tries to control the crowd approaching to lynch Choi. Sergeant Kwon then orders him to flee and find a way to fix everything, as it was the best they could do at that moment, leaving the protagonist even more shocked. Without hesitation, he prepares and starts quickly purchasing agility points, while Kwon goes to help Hyeju contain the crowd. He manages to flee so quickly that the people don't even notice, only seeing the trail he leaves behind, which makes them even more angry and outraged. Suddenly, numerous notifications begin to arrive throughout the city. The system announces that the time remaining until the next turn is 24 hours, causing collective despair and widespread panic. The sergeant then asks everyone to run to safe areas as quickly as possible and to take the injured in vehicles. Meanwhile, amidst the chaos, Hyeju remains confident, looking toward the horizon. After all the uproar, and with everyone calmer, one of the soldiers announces that those intending to fight should go to the left, and those choosing to evacuate to the right. He emphasizes that everyone should check their status windows constantly, stay within the evacuation center, and memorize the locations of the temporary bases. However, there are still elderly people struggling to use the status windows, and they ask the soldiers for help. The man with the megaphone also warns that if anyone encounters Choi Yul, they should flee immediately and report his location. He emphasizes that if Choi gives any advice regarding the attacks, they should isolate themselves until the mission ends, and if someone becomes a sacrifice of sovereignty and hides it from the public, it will be considered a violation of the law and punished accordingly. Meanwhile, Kwon was planning the attack with his companions while Hyeju was doing push-ups to prepare. People were heading toward shelters, and there was still chaos in the streets, but also a lot of faith. Finally, the start of the new turn is announced, and each player must roll their respective die. After the main die falls, it is revealed that pawn number 8 is moving 4 spaces. The system announces that pawn 8 has landed on the Demon King's seal space, and the guardians of the demonic pillars will appear to protect them, requiring all to be destroyed. If this is not achieved within the set time, the Demon King will be summoned. The system sets the mission's time limit, the number of pillars, and the guardian's difficulties, determining that the mission will last 5 days, which Hyeju and Kwon consider plenty of time. It is also announced that there will be 3 pillars, and the first pillar's guardian difficulty will be level 1. The boss of the first pillar is introduced as the fallen angel without fate, a fallen angel wandering in search of its lost destiny. It is notified that the second pillar's guardian difficulty will also be level 1, with the boss Mad Brains, a being that cannot stop creating things, whose inventions improve over time. As for the third pillar, the difficulty will be level 3, shocking Kwon and Hyeju. The boss of the third pillar is the goblin master swordsman Jack, a goblin who has reached the peak of martial arts, surpassed bodily transformation, and seeks to undo the seal to challenge the Demon King. While these announcements were being made, the protagonist was lying down, surrounded by papers and a pentagram drawn on the ground, with a slight smile on his face. Suddenly, the sergeant hears over the radio that citizens have begun to attack and are charging toward the fallen angel. The informant reports that he tried to stop them, but the population is uncontrollable. Kwon comments that they should go too and asks Hyeju what she thinks, but upon turning, he notices she is no longer there. One of his subordinates informs him that she just left. Kwon reflects on all the chaos, concluding that the perfect process and cooperation crumbled in just one day. Meanwhile, Hyeju was face-to-face with the goblin of the third pillar. She positions herself for combat, and staring at the boss, she thinks she must eliminate him before anyone dies. Then, she quickly advances to attack, causing a small explosion with her strike, but she soon realizes the goblin defended the attack with little effort. As she notices him counterattacking, she immediately retreats, dodging the blade. But even seated, the goblin calmly raises his sword, shocking her, and unleashes an immensely powerful strike that cuts through everything it hits. After the blow, he attentively looks forward, not realizing someone was on his right. It was none other than the protagonist, who manages to save her at the last second and catches her in his arms. He quickly places Hyeju on the ground and asks if she can communicate with the others. He comments on all the rewards, instantly making her happy, but then concludes that he will use all of them, ruining her happiness and making her question if he's serious. Choi then turns, saying she should tell people never to show up in front of him again unless they want their rewards stolen. With the book in hand, the protagonist walks through the streets, reflecting that there's no way to return the people's rewards or escape the cursed Demon King's book. He then decides to use the points to buy status, and the system informs him that for every 1 point, his level will also increase by 1. Choi notes that he's already at level 30, but his other attributes are still at 0, and the system quickly asks which status and number he wants to increase. He replies that he will max out all stats. Suddenly, multiple notifications pop up for Hyeju, informing her that Choi Yul is the first to max out all stats, and all the other citizens also receive the same notification, leaving them in disbelief. Choi then begins to feel all the power he possesses and asks how many equipment data he obtained, and the system responds that it was 423,512. He asks for all items below the magic class to be rejected, and for everything from the heroic class and above to be displayed. The system shows that there are 142 legendary class items and 1,023 heroic class items, and all obtained items will be marked, creating an almost endless screen for Choi with all those items. While Hyeju continued battling the goblin, the protagonist reflects that he will use all the rewards he earned to his own advantage, as it's impossible to get rid of them. He then appears on the battlefield, surrounded by a clearly powerful aura, fully equipped and prepared. He thinks he will protect the city from that damn game and return to his original life in peace, believing that this would be the only way to atone for his sins, so he won't care if people insult him or anything like that. The goblin, with his sword in hand, gives a slight smile and prepares for the attack upon noticing a stronger enemy, but to his surprise, Choi apologizes, saying he doesn't have time to play at that moment. With his heroic class aerial magic sneakers, he jumps and floats with a force similar to flight, allowing him to move freely through the air. He shouts for Jack to wait for him, as he will be back soon. Hyeju can't believe what she's seeing, wondering why he just left. The master swordsman sits back down, still confused, and when Hyeju turns around, she is astonished to notice that the goblin is actually going to wait for Choi, which leaves her even more intrigued about that pillar guardian. Meanwhile, the protagonist moves quickly, jumping between the city buildings, reflecting on the fact that Jack doesn't attack first unless someone attacks him first. Soon, the fallen angel notices Choi approaching rapidly, but before he can react, the Prota appears, stepping on his head. With a slight smile, Choi decides to deal with the other pillar guardians before facing the sword-wielding goblin. In the streets, the furious people wonder if Choi has returned and shout for someone to eliminate him. However, when they look ahead, they see an intense fight with several consecutive explosions, which silences them. As Choi pummels the fallen angel, he remembers that the unique trait of that guardian will be unlocked if he meets certain conditions. Some conditions add a weakness, but if they are the wrong ones, the angel may become stronger or gain an ability that is difficult to handle. The battle continues fiercely, with both attacking and defending. Choi reflects that if the angel eliminates 100 humans, he will evolve into the fallen angel who will massacre all of humanity, becoming much stronger and abandoning the pillar to hunt humans. Holding his sword firmly, he delivers a cross slash to the angel, thinking that he must deal with the most problematic guardians first and only unlock the traits necessary for the mission. After the strike, the guardian begins to fall, and before he hits the ground, Choi rips off his wings, knowing that what matters is not just completing the mission, but how it is completed. As the guardian continues to fall rapidly, in a military vehicle, Sergeant Kwan was giving orders over the radio to keep everyone at a safe distance of 500 meters from the pillars until they understood Choi Yul's intentions. He wonders if Choi failed to find a way to return the rewards or if he decided not to return them. Thinking it over, he concludes that Choi didn't seem like a bad person, but he couldn't make decisions based on assumptions. Someone so intelligent and powerful could dominate the entire city if he wanted to, and even Hyeju, whom he trusted to help control Choi, was uncontrollable, making him doubt whether they would be able to complete the mission. Near the truck, the protagonist continued to decimate the fallen angel. Suddenly, the driver notices something and slams on the brakes. The guardian crashes forcefully onto the ground, but the driver manages to avoid the impact. However, The shockwave hurls him away. After the impact, the driver gets out of the vehicle and asks Quan if he is okay, but the sergeant only questions what that was. Looking ahead, he sees someone standing on top of the Guardian, holding his wings. None other than Choi Yul, striking a confident pose with a legendary sword in hand. The weapon is described as a fragment of the sword that once split the heavens and the earth and created the world but lost much of its power and now converts amputated parts of monsters into items. Choi begins interacting with the system, but soon the sergeant approaches, impressed that he has defeated the guardian of the second pillar. Choi gives a slight smile upon seeing him, and without saying anything, makes a super jump, disappearing quickly. This leaves Quan's subordinate in shock as he thinks that Choi is not saying anything, wondering if it is because of the sacrifice of sovereignty. But despite everything, he thinks the Prota seems to have good intentions. The soldier, still trembling with fear, points forward and comments on the Guardian, but Quan instructs him to inform headquarters that the monster has been defeated. However, when he looks ahead, he sees that the creature is still alive and emitting a strange light. The system then notifies that the condition to remove the fallen angel's wings and halo has been met, and a special trait will be unlocked. The trait is corruption, and now the aimless angel begins to transform into another being. Immediately, they realize that the creature is taking on another form, and in the blink of an eye, it transforms into the beast of corruption. Difficulty level 2. The monster is huge and terrifying, leaving the two soldiers paralyzed. Quan concludes that life in that military service really is crap. Unexpectedly, sounds are heard in the street, and soon other soldiers arrive at the sergeant's location. Looking back, he deduces that since the mission has only 3 monsters, it means those creatures are as difficult as an entire invasion. Immediately, he opens fire on the monster in front of him, wondering if Choi would really leave that kind of monster for them to deal with. While the entire squad fires at the creature, the shots hit a building wall and one of the soldiers calls for reinforcements. When he tries to report their location, the monster jumps off the wall and attacks the place where they were, throwing them backward. They start running desperately, and the system informs them that they are under an abnormal fear status, losing their fighting spirit, and fleeing from the enemies. Quan, hearing the agonized screams of his subordinates, gets irritated and resumes shooting at the monster while trying to coordinate the soldiers for an escape. As he runs, he decides to lure the monster away until reinforcements arrive, but he does not notice that the beast is leaping to attack him from behind. When he turns around, he has no chance to defend himself and is crushed by the creature, which slams Quan's body into the ground with full force. Out of nowhere, the Prota appears with his book in hand, saying that the beast has taken over 1. Suddenly, an intense light begins to emanate from under the monster's paw, leaving it confused, and soon the light turns into a small explosion, making the beast scream in pain. The system then provides information about Helden's helmet, alerting that a hidden ability has been activated because a condition was met. Ahead, the sergeant reappears holding a flag. A window explains that when the helmet's bearer is in their final moments of life due to an attack from darkness or corruption, or when leading a group of 5 or more people, the user is possessed by the spirit of Helden. After Quan's revival, a massive spirit of Helden appears alongside him. With this, some voices are heard speaking about the goddess's sword for the demon and the goddess's iron hammer for the fallen. Even Quan comments on the goddess's iron. A screen displays information about the ability, which lasts for 10 minutes, indicating that all equipment will be imbued with divinity, increasing defense and activating fanatic mode, which boosts various stats but causes the user to lose reason and attack all dark/corruption type monsters. The beast is confused upon seeing this, unable to understand what is happening, while the voices continue speaking about the goddess's hammer. Under the effect of fanatic mode, the soldiers begin to wander like zombies, and they are the ones speaking about the goddess's sword and other similar things. With the ability activated for all group members, they start shouting in fury. The protagonist, watching everything, begins to tremble, thinking that this is creepier than he expected. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Quan was speaking with a superior named Kim Song, the battalion commander, who said he would give him a car, but that Quan would be on his own. Quan retorts, asking if that wasn't too much privilege for a mere sergeant. Kim responds that he has a lot of courage and that he likes the guts of a sergeant who can be so frank with the commander. Quan simply remains silent after hearing that. The commander continues, saying they barely have any information about the current situation, and that, in times like these, they need a calm observer. Someone calm and rational, who never loses their composure. Someone capable of making logical judgments in unexpected situations. A cold and rational vigilante. After that, Quan heads off to war against the monsters, giving his all. using items like divine ammunition and unloading entire magazines, motivating his men to charge into the attack without fear. They used rifle butts, bayonets, and even flags in a fierce assault against the monsters until they finally defeated the boss of the first pillar. Meanwhile, in the control room, Commander Kim is informed that they've taken down the Beast of Corruption, the guardian of the first pillar, and that the squad with the highest contribution was the independent escort squad led by Kwon Jae-yong, which makes Kim extremely excited. Elsewhere, the protagonist, while interacting with the system, comments that he was indeed right, as the Pillar Guardian's health had dropped enough for Sergeant Kwon's squad to defeat it. Even after being corrupted, the diminished health remained the same. He points out that, moreover, by turning those corrupted monsters into a new creature, the contributions to the fallen angel without destiny also disappeared, making Sergeant Kwon the top contributor and earning him all the rewards. He turns and asks, "What do you think?" leaving the Goblin Master Swordsman Jack utterly confused. Choi remarks that not being able to speak was quite frustrating and expresses happiness that the goblin is listening. The protagonist then proposes a bet to the goblin, saying that if he wins, he will break the Demon King's seal. This leaves the goblin visibly worried and serious. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Hyeju's spear was working harder than my beer opener. She delivers countless blows against an anti-human machine of difficulty level 1, and, after quickly defeating several of them, contemplates going to the second pillar after receiving a rescue call. Looking at a battalion of machines in front of her, she concludes that it seems endless, as, above all, the robots keep improving. She then realizes she'll have to finish things with a deadly skill before the situation becomes more dangerous. Hyeju asks everyone there to retreat, but the citizens question what she's talking about, arguing that they also need points, and accusing her of only saying that because she already has a legendary item. Others comment that they need points to save their families and won't let their fight be in vain. At the same time, at the third pillar, 2 people were lurking, prepared, until they emerged attacking with crossbows from the archery unit of the Aran Kingdom, a magical class item that increases attack power the more members of the Aran Kingdom's army are present. But the boss, Insane Brains, notices the 2 enthusiasts and instantly paralyzes them. Without hesitation, it attacks with a laser that, luckily, is defended by Hyeju. Though with great difficulty, she can't hold on, and a massive explosion occurs. Even so, she manages to save the 2 adventurers and herself, but ends up getting injured. In an instant, she turns, urging them to run quickly, but when she looks again, she realizes they had already fled in desperation. Hyeju smiles in relief, but unexpectedly, the boss's eyes begin emitting rays. It starts analyzing Hyeju to detect risk factors, and the conclusion is reached almost immediately. And right after, the boss starts creating an anti-Hyeju machine, which worries her, making her think she needs to stop it urgently. Out of nowhere, the machines begin to focus in the same direction, all charging at Hyeju at the same time. But she manages to defend herself from the attacks, and quickly realizes that they are all targeting her, which she considers very good. Without hesitation, she launches an attack that causes an explosion, eliminating several at once. After the dust settles, she pauses for a moment and sees the boss. Then, she turns to the citizens and asks them to move away as quickly as possible. She then throws her spear upward, which rapidly heads toward the pillar while people try to flee. The spear begins to fall at high speed, directly toward the boss, Insane Brains, and upon hitting it, it causes a colossal explosion, throwing the nearby people away with the shockwave, making one of them think that, at this rate, Hyeju would end up wiping everyone out. After the attack, the young heroine gives a relieved smile, reflecting that this world has not been easy. But as she looks forward, she notices that the boss created a magical shield and that there was some creature at the top of the pillar. The creature is none other than the anti-Hyeju machine, difficulty level 2, with various attributes against her, including fire resistance, which surprises her deeply. In the blink of an eye, the machine flies and lands behind her. Even trying to react quickly, Hyeju is struck by a powerful charge from the robot, which destroys everything in its path. As she is flung away, Hyeju looks back and tries to process what is happening, as she sees Choi reaching the boss's location. After eliminating the boss with a single strike, Choi appears to be extracting something from the monster and moments later disappears at an incredible speed. After witnessing all that in mere milliseconds, the machine's attack that struck her comes to an end, and the robot begins walking toward the crater that was created. But upon arriving, it is surprised to see only a large puddle, with no other sign of her. Immediately, the robot detects that the target has vanished, identifies traces, and begins tracking. Meanwhile, Insane Brains, even without its head, reaches a condition to unlock the Insane Order feature, which makes the last item produced be manufactured repeatedly. Moreover, it doubles the speed of the manufacturing process and the production quantity, thus initiating an army of machines that will be produced until the main unit is destroyed. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the protagonist, with his book, notices a circle in the sky emitting strong lightning and lights. He thinks that the pillar took longer than expected to fall and that many people are hiding out of fear. At the first pillar, people were attacking with long-range weapons but were frustrated by the pillar's resistance and the fact that their firepower was running out. At the second pillar, the battle continues relentlessly, with people fighting on the front lines against the machines. One of the combatants urges the injured to leave immediately. The injured are promptly evacuated, and they soon notice the arrival of 3 vehicles. The protagonist, observing all this, reflects that he could easily defeat all of them, but that it wouldn't make sense, as to conquer the game completely, the current mission was not enough. He thinks the entire city needs to grow stronger, and for that to happen, the first thing they need to establish is a capable commander and a hero. Hyeju, still unconscious after being attacked, suddenly wakes up, surprised to be alive. Upon seeing someone approaching, she asks if it was him who saved her, but upon realizing it's Goblin Master Swordsman Jack, the boss of the third pillar, she panics and starts screaming. The boss simply asks her to be quiet. She scratches her head awkwardly and apologizes, explaining that she was startled. However, upon realizing the goblin can speak, she is shocked once again. Jack explains that he treated her wounds and that they don't have much time, so they must start right away. She gets annoyed at being ignored by him, but asks what he means by start. Then, the goblin draws a sword. Offering the sword to Hyeju, Jack says that Choi told him, "After a great defeat, find a great teacher and cultivate her strength." This leaves Hyeju as confused as I am at this moment. Simultaneously, elsewhere in the city, a bright flash is seen cutting through the skies. It was none other than the anti-Hyeju machine, calculating that the distance to her is 325 meters. The robot then identifies the target and initiates the annihilation process, launching a deadly attack and creating a massive explosion. But suddenly, it is blocked by Choi, who managed to deceive the machine, mocking it for falling for such a cheap trick. The protagonist is equipped with a heroic class amulet, the Attached Insane Brain, which can confuse machine attribute monsters and disable traps and mechanical devices 5 times per mission. After the first attack, the robot locks onto the amulet, fooled by the item. Choi then positions himself to direct the attack where he wants. Without hesitation, the machine fires an energy-charged beam that, upon impact, causes a colossal explosion, illuminating the entire city. The blast cuts straight through a building, leaving citizens in another nearby building shocked as they notice the attack, which hits the pillar they had been struggling to destroy for hours, reducing it to ruins with the impact. After that, the machine follows the amulet, attempting to track it, while the protagonist concludes that the attack should have been enough to destroy the pillar once and for all. He turns and thanks the robot, saying that apparently the population's problems have been solved, joking that they can continue playing hide-and-seek. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Hyeju struggles to block a sword strike from Goblin Jack. Maintaining the attack, he tells her to try using that power. Immediately, she begins to move the legendary spear, creating a power around her. But Jack steps back and manages to dodge. Even so, she keeps advancing. As she tries to strike the Master Goblin, she hears him saying, while dodging, that since that power doesn't belong to Hyeju, she might get hurt. He explains that instead of blindly using too much of that borrowed power, it's important for her to use only the amount she can handle. Hyeju doesn't stop attacking and fiercely tries to strike the goblin, who emphasizes that the power shouldn't control her. She must control it. While listening to his teachings hovering in the air, she focuses on one of the pillars still standing. Upon falling to the ground, exhausted, she asks Jack if Choi had bet on her, believing she could defeat that robot, questioning if that's really possible. The Master Swordsman then turns and remains silent, making Hyeju reflect that staying quiet at that moment isn't very encouraging. But the goblin begins to speak and asks if she let him train her because she trusts Choi Yul or because she needs to get stronger. Hyeju replies that she doesn't know the reason either, to his surprise. She explains that she's still very confused with all this game and mission stuff and that she isn't smart enough to figure out the answers just by thinking. Hyeju clenches her fist and states that she wants to strengthen her own body first, and will see what comes next if she stays on this path. With a smile on her face and stretching, she says that's her way of living. This catches Jack's attention, who initially thought she was being used by the protagonist, but realizes that, in reality, she is a martial artist forging her own path. He flashes an enthusiastic smile at this, and decides he will take the training seriously, warning Hyeju to prepare herself. 3 days later, in the city center, many citizens were underground recovering and staying safe. A man in pink asks if it will ever end, while a woman, looking at the system, becomes concerned and asks if they shouldn't go out to help those fighting. The man responds that she must be crazy because if they go out, they risk losing points again. Other people also discuss the matter until suddenly, everyone hears a noise and, looking at the ceiling, wonder what it is. Suddenly, the wall explodes, putting everyone on high alert, fearing what was coming. The anti-Hyeju machine enters and begins to walk coldly, searching for Hyeju's trace. The robot scans everyone in the area, and suddenly its system reports that the target has been identified, initiating fire toward the people. Quickly, the machine starts firing in all directions upon detecting the target is moving, leaving everyone in despair. After nearly destroying the entire area, the robot declares the target has been hit and the annihilation is complete, then starts to leave the subway. But suddenly, it notices the amulet it detects as the target, which leaves it confused. Unexpectedly, a brilliant aura begins descending through the hole it entered from, causing it to detect Hyeju's signal. The people look at the light in disbelief, wondering who it could be, and even the robot is shocked to see Hyeju standing right there with an imposing and stunning appearance, leading some to wonder if she is an angel. The system announces that the conditions for the special event, which consisted of becoming the Goblin Master's apprentice, were fulfilled, and as a result, Hyeju received a reward of heroic or higher class. Now more prepared than ever, she donned the heroic armor Ember of Illusion, which increases defense power based on the number of fire equipment the user possesses. Meanwhile, on top of a building, the protagonist asks Jack if he also used that feminine equipment, to which he replies it was what he used to have. As Hyeju's battle against the machine unfolds, Choi asks what the chances of success are, and the goblin responds that it's 50-50. Either it works or it doesn't. The Goblin Master reflects that, although the machine is a natural enemy of Hyeju, she has now learned martial arts techniques, and if the seed he planted blossoms at the right time, the machine will certainly be destroyed. Hyeju now has the passive ability, Apprentice of the Sword Master, which grants her greater proficiency with short-range weapons. After 3 days, 15 hours, and 34 minutes since the mission began, the first pillar was destroyed as Kwan's battalion advanced without respite. After 3 days, 17 hours, and 21 minutes, the guardian of the second pillar was defeated. Now, at 3 days, 21 hours, and 1 minute since the start of the mission, Hyeju, facing her personal battle against the machine designed specifically against her, is able to destroy it with a fatal spear strike straight into the robot's torso. People on the street look confused, exchanging glances. After 4 days since the mission began, while Sergeant Kwan's battalion demolished another pillar, he notices someone approaching. Seeing Hyeju's silhouette followed by others, he concludes that most of the citizens have returned to the game. After 4 days, 3 hours, and 44 minutes, at pawn 8, the second pillar was destroyed. At that moment, people thought to themselves, we can do this. We can complete the first mission without Choi Yul's help. That was what they thought, and it was also what the protagonist reflected. Suddenly, the goblin calls Choi and says that the apprentice Hyeju has succeeded, so he will keep his promise, even though she still has a long way to go. They were on a floating platform near the tallest building in the city, and Choi says that now it's his turn to act. Meanwhile, on the ground, the troops prepare for another battle, organizing equipment and food. In a room, Kwan listens on the radio as Commander Kim Song yells, saying he had sent Kwan only to investigate the area, but now he returns as a general. Kwan tries to apologize but hears the commander retort, questioning if he thought an apology would fix everything. Kim soon calms down and says it doesn't matter, but that Kwan should leave the protection of the wounded to him, assuring him that he could do whatever he wanted because he would take responsibility. The commander also says he will promote him if he performs well, but the sergeant responds that it's unnecessary. Then he turns off the radio and sighs, irritated. Suddenly, he notices Hyeju arriving and saying they should leave, which he promptly confirms. As they walked, Kwan asks if she's sure everything will be fine, but she replies yes because she already promised her master. As she passes by, everyone is enchanted by her, calling her a goddess. She remembers the Goblin Master's promise, who warned that next time they met, they would be enemies. After hearing the story, the sergeant wonders if he'll be able to defeat a difficulty 3 monster, against which even Hyeju is no match. He reflects that it will result in many casualties regardless of the outcome, and also questions what the protagonist might be thinking. Suddenly, as they walked, the two see something that leaves them in shock. Looking up, they notice the platform in the sky just suffered a powerful impact. Watching closely, they realize it's Choi Yul, who, preparing another kick, strikes with full force. Completely destroying the mysterious object, the system suddenly announces that the Demon King's seal has been destroyed by Choi, leaving both Hyeju and Kwon speechless. The system also alerts that the mission objective has been altered, and with that, lights and red lightning begin to emerge from the broken seal. A horde of monsters starts to emerge from the seal as the system warns that the seal holds the Demon King and that failure will mean the end of the game. People panic upon seeing this, saying that Choi is a psychopath. Kwon and Hyeju also can't believe that the protagonist has done this, and even the Goblin Master comments that he didn't expect him to actually be capable of doing it. Drawing his sword, Jack remarks that there are many interesting humans these days, and charges at the problem at full speed. With sword in hand and covered in an aura, he begins mercilessly slaughtering the monsters, causing a true massacre, which terrifies Hyeju and the sergeant. Climbing onto one of the flying demons, Jack declares that this is a gift and homework for his apprentice, saying she should dedicate herself, and bids farewell, warning that he will await their next fateful meeting. Meanwhile, the protagonist arrives at another location, now equipped with the Angel's Halo, a legendary class accessory that protects the user in the infernal demonic dimension. He begins walking toward a monster, commenting that getting there was simpler than he expected. Then he shouts, calling the creature Lord Demon King, and when the monster turns around, he asks if it is Krasina, the Demon King of Sovereignty. The monster, smiling, says it has never heard that name before, and questions how a human managed to get there. This is the Demon King of Authority, Katumbaba, difficulty level 6, who takes pleasure in destroying things with his own hands and absorbs the flesh and bones of the opponents he eliminates to strengthen his fists. The protagonist reflects for a moment and comments that he thought Demon Kings interacted with each other. Turning away, he concludes that things went wrong and that it will still take some time, leaving Katumbaba confused. Choi apologizes for interrupting the Demon King's meal and warns that his opponent will arrive soon, asking him to wait. Katumbaba smiles, saying that's a bit embarrassing, and suddenly delivers a brutal punch to the ground, almost hitting Choi. The protagonist turns around, startled, and suddenly the Goblin Master appears. As soon as he lands, Jack is terrified to look ahead and see the monster being brutally beaten. The one attacking mercilessly was Choi Yul, who cruelly ripped off the monster's fists while joking that he was acting on instinct and ironically saying that was against the rules. The Demon King, bewildered, wonders how a mere human was capable of doing that. Choi sarcastically says it was unintentional and asks him to calm down. Tumbaba begins regenerating his fists with magic and questions how Choi dared to do that. Meanwhile, the protagonist asks the Goblin Master if he's not going to switch places with him soon, and Jack replies that he would like to, but thinks the opponent would rather stay with him. While Choi says everything is under control, the monster prepares a surprise attack from behind, but is struck by an absurdly powerful blow. As he is sent flying away, he reflects that things turned upside down at the last moment. He is violently thrown to the ground, causing a colossal impact that leaves him unconscious. Choi is equipped with the Air's Battle Jacket, a legendary class gear that increases defense based on the user's HP. The Demon King attacks the ground again, creating a shockwave that almost buries the protagonist in rubble. Upon regaining consciousness, Choi reflects that there's not much to be done about the situation and decides to wait for people to accumulate points by hunting monsters, to end this before more people die. While the Demon King was devastating Choi, the goblin watched silently from afar. Meanwhile, in the city, a warlike scene was unfolding. Kwon's battalion kept relentlessly attacking the demons that emerged, and the sergeant ordered people to evacuate inside. Kwon pauses for a moment to catch his breath, and observing the scene, thinks that although the monsters don't have much combat power, there are too many of them. Noticing some injured people in a corner, he concludes that if this continues, the citizens won't hold out for long. Furthermore, Choi has become the enemy of the entire city just for breaking the Demon King's seal, and if anyone loses their life, it will undoubtedly be blamed on him. Suddenly, Hyeju appears landing on a car, and the passenger points forward, indicating the shelter where the rescue signal came from. Hyeju then leaps toward the location and, even surrounded by monsters, easily eliminates them using her spear, leaving only charred remains on the ground. She stops and begins guiding people, while one of the citizens, passing by her, comments that if Choi hadn't broken the seal, they would have already completed the mission by now. A woman behind him, also irritated, questions what Choi was thinking by doing that. Annoyed by the conversation, Hyeju just sighs as a woman approaches and asks if she can really pass through there. The name of this woman is Kang Ji-woo, and she continues mocking. saying she thought Hyeju would explode upon hearing people bad-mouthing her boyfriend, emphasizing that Hyeju is colder than she seems. Furious at her words, the heroine asks who said that Choi and she are a couple, but Kang simply replies that it doesn't matter, and if Hyeju says they're not, that's fine. Passing by Hyeju, Kang leaves the snack she was eating in her hands, saying it was a thank you for escorting her to the safe zone, which makes Hyeju happy. However, upon opening the package to eat, she realizes there was only half a piece inside. Meanwhile, during the fight, the protagonist gets up and notices the Goblin Master drawing his sword. Jack then asks Choi to step back, catching him off guard. He asks what's wrong and if, by any chance, Choi is developing feelings for him, leaving the protagonist speechless. Choi's conscience ponders that, if he and the goblin had met in another world, perhaps they could have gone out for a drink together. Suddenly, the goblin charges forward, leaving Choi apprehensive and feeling a bit guilty. Seeing the swordsman fighting fiercely against the Demon King, he reflects that it's too late to activate the martial artist's destiny. Even if there was still time, he would continue feeling guilty. Suddenly, the book begins emitting a strong energy, and the system announces that friendship with Goblin Jack has reached the maximum level, activating a hidden Krasina ability. Choi looks at the book, trying to understand what's happening, and soon gives a broad smile. Meanwhile, Jack, already severely wounded in the fight, says that despite everything, Kutumbaba is the Demon King. Facing the gigantic monster head-on, he grips the sword tightly, stating that it's time to use the ultimate move. He concentrates, thinking he will use the final move, even knowing it will put his life at risk. However, he will do it in the name of his friend and his disciple. But before he could do anything, the protagonist lands a powerful blow, violently tearing off Tumbaba's head, leaving Jack incredulous. The Demon King, furious and with cracks in his head, quickly explodes, creating a terrifyingly large shockwave. The system announces that the Demon King Tumbaba has been defeated and that the greatest contribution was made by Choi Yul. The Goblin Master is stunned by all of this, and it's soon announced that all summoned monsters have been annihilated. Suddenly, an energy begins to surround the goblin. With the book in hand, Choi notices that he now has the ability to recruit 4 sovereign masters, being able to sign a familiar spirit contract with a creature in maximum sympathy or fear state. This leaves him completely speechless. Then the system asks if he is sure he wants to sign a familiar spirit contract with the Goblin Master Swordsman Jack. Choi just rolls his eyes. Afterward, the protagonist begins to fall from where he was and comments that he is now hated by humans and allied with a monster. Looking at the contract with the swordsman, he comments, relieved, that he feels he's becoming increasingly distant from being human. Suddenly, the system notifies that the surviving citizens will be rewarded, with a total reward of 800 points. Then, the list of the mission's top scorers is announced. In third place, Kwon. In second, Hyeju. And in first, the protagonist. This makes the people even more frustrated and angry with Choi. On the streets of the city, Hyeju walked calmly while being watched by someone atop a building. That person was Kang, who, while also observing the protagonist, wondered if he was a golden boy, or perhaps a fuse of a ticking time bomb. Meanwhile, Kwon rests after the intense battle and reflects that he doesn't know much about games, but can say that this one seems like a base defense system with a large number of troops. He wonders if, in that case, the existence of a supreme unit would really be possible because, even though Choi is at the maximum level, the idea of a supreme being capable of easily defeating even a demon king shouldn't be something the game would allow. After some time, the system notifies that an abnormal unit has been detected. That unit is the protagonist himself, who managed to achieve all attributes at their maximum level. The system announces that it will decide an action to deal with the unit, presenting 4 options: annihilate, reset, submit, or summon. The Supreme Being, about to make its decision, selects the annihilate option. Suddenly, Choi feels something and wonders what's happening. He lands on the ground and comments that it felt as if someone was watching him. At the same time, in another dimension, an error message appears stating that the command could not be executed. Then the system begins a thorough inspection of the chosen unit and displays its screen. Choi appears on the screen, being configured as a hidden unit, meaning other players will not be able to see him. After the modification, the system announces it will return to the game. In the city, people begin to celebrate the points earned, and a man announces that he will reveal the research results on the reward data. He holds the messenger's voice, a mid-tier item capable of transmitting the user's voice over long distances. The more mana the user has, the greater the range. The man explains that there are 7 types of dice, and that the numbers vary depending on the type. Then, the 7 different types of dice are presented, each associated with a class. Items, weapons, equipment, and tools are produced randomly. Dice that roll between 1 and 60 correspond to the common class, 61 to 80 to the magic class, and so on. Sergeant Quan realizes he received a destiny spork, a heroic class accessory that always returns to its owner, even if lost, and is always clean. This makes him think that receiving a high-class item is not always necessarily a good thing. On the streets, a man offers a knife to a girl in exchange for a shield, something many people have started doing, trading weapons and equipment. In the middle of it all was Quan with his powerful spork. He remembers a conversation with Hyeju in which she said she wasn't well suited for the military field, but that many people were still hiding out of fear, and she wanted to help them. With a positive sign, she affirmed she would also assist with the missions, asking Quan not to worry about it. Returning to the present, Quan walks through the streets reflecting that everyone is truly adapting to that surreal world. As Choi observes the city, he thinks that the citizens are progressing well and concludes that the heroine will be essential for the missions, and the military will take their positions. However, he ponders that how things will be done from now on is the most important, because if something goes wrong, the city could be destroyed by the hands of its own citizens. While reflecting, he hears something and, turning around, notices a girl standing there. It's Kang, who introduces herself saying, "Hello, Choi." Immediately, he looks at the book and starts searching for information about the girl. He asks how she got there, and Kang responds that she simply climbed, leaving him speechless. Kang starts to approach, making him uncomfortable, and comments that she thought he would be sad for being isolated, but apparently, he's used to loneliness. Realizing she said something inappropriate, she tries to cover it up and changes the subject, saying that today wouldn't work and that she would come back later. Choi, surprised, asks why she came to see him. She approaches again and asks if, by chance, he can't figure that out by looking in the book. The protagonist replies that unfortunately, thoughts aren't part of the available information. The girl then sets up a rappel and says that's good because she just wanted to see Choi's face. This leaves him extremely intrigued. Jumping off the building, she comments that she wanted to see the face of the idiot who has the power to dominate the city but still chose the hardest path. The protagonist runs to the edge to try to talk more, but Kang had already descended by rappel, leaving him hanging. This leaves him startled, wondering what the hell just happened. After some time, in the late afternoon, the system sends notifications to the population, informing them that the city's experience has increased, rising to level 1, and that citizens' amenities will now be improved. Hyeju is pleased with the notification and decides to check the system settings, which now include customization options, the ability to add or block friends, and even calls. The system also alerts that the city's infrastructure will be partially renovated, which begins to happen quickly. The protagonist, sitting on the edge of the building, reflects that the more points citizens spend, the more experience the city gains. Then, he concludes that the points he uses don't contribute to the city's experience. He thinks for a while and, looking at the book, wonders where the points he spent went. Deducing that they might be going to his divine, who is playing, he begins to question whether it's really good to keep using the book. Elsewhere, a second lieutenant's badge is pinned on a uniform. It's Commander Kim, promoting Quan. Kang, observing the entire scene, concludes that they're doing pretty well and wonders where she should fit in to feel more comfortable. With a few lifeless soldiers around her and lots of data she stole from other citizens, Kang comments that this city was far too dangerous for a fragile citizen like her. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues sitting, reflecting on the book. Suddenly, the system announces that the new shift has begun, catching Choi's attention. The system informs them that they've reached the Golden God's trap and that the city has been captured by him. If they don't satisfy the Golden God within the time limit, it will be game over. The Golden God's level of greed is 2, and there will be 4 maps lasting a total of 2 weeks. After receiving the information, Sergeant Quan comments that he hadn't considered the fact that the units might vary. On alert, he instructs the team to find the treasures from the summoned maps and bring them to the city. The value of the treasure will be directly related to the Golden God's satisfaction, and the treasures can only be appraised within the city. With this information, citizens begin to wonder why so much time is available, especially since no monster has even been summoned in the city. Some discuss that if any citizen completes the mission, everyone will receive the general reward. But no one imagines how furious the Golden God is. The system soon informs that there will be no general reward in this mission, and that individual rewards will depend solely on the amount of satisfaction offered to the Golden God. Soon, The citizens fall into despair upon realizing that they will need to participate in the mission to earn rewards. Some comment that they don't even have combat equipment, while even the heroine is surprised by that information. Observing the device, Hyeju notices that the mission has many descriptions, so she decides to ignore them for now and head straight into the mission, as she will have to scour the entire map on her own. As she tears through the skies to complete the mission, Choi watches her from afar. He reflects that whoever is playing this damned game is very lucky when it comes to rolling the dice. He thinks that if all goes well, they might be able to complete the first level of the city's development plan during that mission. Then, Choi decides to use Krasina's book until the mission ends, and promises that afterward, he will find a way to get rid of it. But suddenly, a spear emerges from the book, striking him directly in the chest, leaving him terrified. Yet, in the blink of an eye, everything disappears, leaving him even more confused. Unexpectedly, the system announces that the number of sovereignty sacrifices in the last mission is 0. Out of nowhere, the protagonist begins to feel intense pain in his chest, exactly where he was struck. Then the system notifies him that this is the position of the Demon King, reprimanding Choi for his idleness. This makes him feel terrible, agonizing pain. The protagonist is informed that until he offers sovereignty sacrifices, he will suffer intense pain and continuously lose HP. While writhing in pain on the ground, the system informs him that if no sovereignty sacrifice offerings are made before his HP reaches 0, he will be exterminated, and Krasina's book will choose a new owner. Sometime later, in Sector A jungle, a few citizens arrive near a cave. One of them says they have finally found the dungeon, and another replies that it looks like an unregistered dungeon. The guy in the cap comments that this is great because now they have a chance to hit it big. However, the young man wearing a wizard's hat asks if everything will be okay, pointing out that if they report the location to the military, they could each receive 50 points. The guy in the cap, drawing his sword, asks what they would do with such measly change. He wields a weapon called Black Flame Dragon, which deals medium fire damage and applies extra damage when equipped in the right hand. If combined with the Crystal Ice Dragon weapon for left-handers, the attribute damage increases. They prepare to enter the dungeon, saying they will make history. This is the level 4 group called Kangs and Roses, and the leader is named Kang Doyop, currently at level 3. Suddenly, a huge noise starts coming from the cave, and something begins to emerge. The group leader comments that something is coming and asks if it might be a gatekeeper monster. The wizard responds that the patterns are quite obvious, and Kang points out that they used to be squad leaders and guild masters, so this world was nothing more than a playground for them. But suddenly, the protagonist emerges from the cave, carrying a gigantic sack filled with shining items. Before Kang can say the protagonist's name, Choi appears behind him, saying that the cripple is the boss. The protagonist starts saying things like, he uses poison, so an antidote is necessary. He is surprisingly fast, so the tanks need to focus on defending the mages and healers. Inexplicably, everyone in the group starts feeling a severe headache, as if going crazy from those words. Then, Choi says there is also a secret room inside the dungeon, while Kang screams in agony, saying there is something wrong with the protagonist's eyes. Meanwhile, in the city center, an angry man slams the table, shouting that he can't believe they became sacrifices of sovereignty on the very first day of the mission. He asks if that is fair, and emphasizes that they need to do something to stop Choi Yul. The short guy who was eating says they can't do anything against a max-level guy with a mythical weapon in hand. He suggests they just give up on that wasted mission and stay quiet there, in the sovereignty sacrifice isolation field. A woman stands up and asks where the protagonist captured them from, and the seated guy comments that it was in the jungle area, while another says he was taken in the canyons. One of them asks if the others noticed Choi's expression, pointing out that he looked like a demon. Another replies that he did, which is why he believes this is the protagonist's true intention. He recalls Choi's words saying, "Now spread the sacrifice of sovereignty for me," and comments that just looking at the protagonist made him shit himself. Honestly, he considered throwing this whole sovereignty sacrifice thing to hell and just going after the treasure, but he decided not to benefit Choi, so he returned to the field. Another young man confirms that he thinks the same way and says they can't let the almighty Choi Yul manipulate them as he pleases. Meanwhile, tossing a cube up and catching it again, the protagonist simply stares at the Book of Krasina. He observes that the recorded count of sovereignty sacrifices is at 2,452, which slightly satisfies the Demon King and reduces the punishment on him. With this, the protagonist concludes that the situation is finally a bit more manageable. Looking at the book, he questions the Demon King's punishment, as there was no such function in the item's description, making him conclude that the book is not revealing all of its information. But in any case, he breathes a sigh of relief, and comments that everything is still within what he had anticipated. However, he reflects that the Demon King seems to think he has him under control with this punishment, but by the end of the mission, the Demon King will find out who is really in control. Surrounded by numerous seemingly valuable items, the protagonist decides to start taking action. Meanwhile, in the canyon, in the Emperor Griffin's nest, the majestic bird soars. This is the difficulty 3 Emperor Griffin, a beast said to have inherited the blood of dragons, and that increases its difficulty level when fighting within its nest. The bird begins flying directly toward Choi. At the same time elsewhere, Hyeju is fighting a monster and drives her spear into the troll's neck. It is a level 2 stone troll that evolved to adapt to the canyon environment. As she fights, she remembers the teachings of Master Jack, who said that power was not meant to be controlled. Instead, she should allow the power to flow naturally and follow its own course. With that in mind, she swiftly strikes the monster's neck, severing its head. After defeating it, Hyeju thanks the Goblin Master, noting that her apprentice is getting a little stronger. Suddenly, she notices Kang Ji-woo rummaging through a treasure chest. She approaches and calls her Miss Ji-woo, which makes Kang respond that she could be more informal. Then, in a playful tone, Hyeju calls her a bitch and asks why she's following her. Kang replies that tagging along with her brings more advantages. The two continue walking as Hyeju thinks that this lunatic answered so proudly that it left her speechless. Ji-woo turns around and asks if there's a problem, questioning if Hyeju would abandon her there, a fragile and lonely citizen in a dangerous place. This makes Hyeju uneasy, unsure of what to say. Then she takes out the system device and tells Ji-woo to wait a moment. Hyeju had sent a message to her uncle, Woongi, with the coordinates to retrieve the treasure and share it. She notices that Woongi had already responded, saying he would arrive soon. Meanwhile, above them, on a cliff, a creature watches them from afar. As they continue, Hyeju notices Ji-woo's small bag and comments that it's quite small, considering she's been following her all day. Kang, with a smile, replies that her motto is quality over quantity. She emphasizes that she can't say what the treasure is until she takes it to the city for appraisal. That's why she only picks things that make her think, this is it. Hyeju questions how she has that feeling. Ji-woo turns, points to herself, and says, with my eyes. This confuses Hyeju, but she thinks that even though Ji-woo is strange, she's cool. As they walk, Ji-woo asks about Hyeju's friends, and the heroine responds that she simply took care of the monsters that appeared in her path. Ji-woo then says that she really doesn't know anything, leaving Hyeju speechless. Kang turns to her with a serious tone and says that the monsters aren't the real enemies in this mission. Furthermore, it's not a peaceful treasure hunt. Hearing this, Hyeju's eyes widen, visibly surprised. Ji-woo explains that this is an individual battle where anything goes since there's no collective reward, and the treasure can only be claimed after appraisal. This will make people fight each other instead of facing the monsters. Sometime later, at night, in the Grag Motel, police officers investigate a crime scene in a room with a broken window. A tall, strong man arrives, and one of the officers greets him, calling him Detective Seo. The man in the background is Kang Dushik, level 6, and the big guy is Seo Unseok, level 14, who asks if this is another case of a stolen treasure. The officer confirms and says that apparently someone suddenly passed out during the treasure appraisal, and when they woke up, all the items were gone. Seo explains that they should have handed the treasure directly to the god of gold, which Dushik confirms, emphasizing that the appraisal randomly takes between 1 and 12 hours, as if the system were telling the citizens, steal if you can. This irritates Detective Seo, who asks how Dushik can interpret it that way, pointing out that this reasoning is pathetic. Dushik retorts, saying that this is a very human interpretation. The officers feel the tension between the two, and one of them comments that he can't believe they're letting Detective Seo, the brown bear of the violent crimes unit, get to him. The other officer says he doesn't even think Dushik is a cop. Suddenly, they are shocked to see Choi Yul riding the Emperor Griffin and waving. Seo quickly covers the protagonist's mouth before he can say anything and prepares to throw a punch, using the legendary Fungbok gloves, one of the 3 divine relics of the old dynasty. They enhance wind-based attacks and can manipulate the air around them. When all 3 relics are gathered, the class changes to mythical, but their effects are only activated if a single user possesses all 3 pieces. Seo launches his attack, sending Choi flying through the window and crashing hard into the ground, creating a crater. Dushik approaches the window and orders the officers to issue an alert about Choi and evacuate the people in the area. He reflects that by charging straight at Choi, while his equipment and level are maxed out, Seo is at a disadvantage, but it demonstrates a professional habit worthy of respect. However, Dushik remarks that he would be happier if this good habit led Choi Yul to end Seo's life. As he overpowers the protagonist, Seo pauses for a moment and realizes that Choi isn't dodging the attacks or even looking surprised. He questions what Choi is planning. Suddenly, a piece of news completely paralyzes the city. People talk among themselves, sending messages about the fact that Choi Yul has been arrested. On the streets, everyone begins celebrating the news, saying they can now take the equipment. A man wearing a helmet says they need to gain as much as possible while Choi is imprisoned. But what no one expected was that the god of gold was furious. Meanwhile, in Sector A in the Goblin Village, a massacre was taking place. A man wielded the Owl Warrior's tomahawk, a heroic class axe rewarded to the best warrior of the Night Owl tribe, which returns to the user after being thrown. The man's name is Hwang Minwoo, and he announces that he has cleared the area. However, the man beside him notices some goblins escaping and comments that it was not clear at all, emphasizing that area clearing has always been his responsibility. His name is Lee Woojin, and he carries a heroic class bow called Elfrin's Pride, which increases the speed and power of projectiles, further enhancing attacks when using elf-made arrows. The goblins try to flee from the shots, running in desperation. 2 are hit, but 1 remains standing, running, and smiling. Minwoo warns his partner that they lost a target and that he told him to use the rifle. Woojin replies that a bow and arrow offer more immersion in a fantasy world. Minwoo retorts, saying that the elf is watching them and laughing, but Woojin says no one cares about that. Suddenly, a distant shot blows off the fleeing goblin's head. Realizing the precise shot, they remember the sergeant keeping watch. Up in a tree, Sniper Sergeant Park Seong-kyu calls them idiots and tells them they will have to run 10 laps around the mining grounds as soon as they return. Park is equipped with the Wanderer's overcoat, which is resistant to both cold and heat and reduces the chances of being noticed by monsters' perception. After completing the mission, he radios the platoon commander to report that they have finished clearing the outer region. Now Commander Kwan, already at level 20, acknowledges and informs them that they are almost done as well. Near him, a goblin performs a ritual with 4 elves surrounding a circle on the ground. The goblin says that soon their god will descend, and when that happens, no one will be able to avoid death. But looking ahead, he notices that he is being watched by 2 humans. One of them, wearing a magic class explosion ring, allowing him to use a magical explosion every 30 minutes, points the ring at the goblin and shows his middle finger. His name is Kim Kwang-soo. He activates the ring, causing a colossal explosion. Kwan observes the crater and comments that attacking while the enemy is transforming or summoning is cheating, but concludes by saying that they are soldiers and life is not a cartoon. Elsewhere, Minwoo destroys a door with his axe, and Woojin radios in to report that they have found the target. Seeing several people in the area, he reports that they have located the 18 citizens reported missing. Most of them are injured, and they request reinforcements. At military command headquarters, Kim Song responds that reinforcements will be sent and that the engineering unit is also on its way. He mentions that they plan to turn the Goblin Village into an outpost. Kim also notes that he has heard about Choi Yul's arrest and asks Kwan if he knows what he is planning. Kwan promptly denies it. Song comments that the most frightening thing about Choi is not the Krasina book, but rather the protagonist's discernment, as he knows exactly what to do with the information he gathers, making his actions difficult to predict. However, one thing is certain: Choi is not an enemy. Elsewhere in the city, the Emperor Griffin yawns and, feeling sleepy, lies down in the police station parking lot to rest. Inside the building, food is served, and Choi starts eating as if there is no tomorrow. Dushik comments that even someone at the max level like Choi still feels hunger, and the protagonist confirms it. Detective Seo, irritated, asks if the 2 are just going to sit there chatting. Crossing his arms, he points out that Yul is now a criminal, accused of theft, fraud, and even homicide. And with a smile, the protagonist confirms everything, acknowledging all the crimes. Seo also mentions that he has been in this line of work for 20 years, and all he needs to do is look at a criminal's face. Dushik observes the conversation as Seo concludes that Choi is not a bad person and that everything that happened was an accident, surprising the protagonist. Dushik approaches and pats him on the shoulder, explaining that this means the situation is perfect for the Good Samaritan law, a law that allows those who harmed others with good intentions to avoid punishment. Seo gives a thumbs up, emphasizing that it was good for Choi to turn himself in, and promises to clear up the misunderstanding people have about him. Choi listens in silence and, after finishing his meal, says he is not there to seek help, surprising the detective. Suddenly, a police officer opens the door and shouts that there is urgent news. He reports a robbery case in which the assailant is using heroic equipment, and the police are struggling to apprehend him. As a result, the incidents continue because they do not have enough power to deal with the criminal. Immediately, they head to the scene using a police bus. Dushik comments that when it comes to missions without general rewards, there is no cooperation at all, and that is how it should have been from the beginning. Chaos for a new order, fitting for a new world and new powers. Detective Seo responds that Dushik really has the attitude of a little punk, and that he should start thinking like a sane person. Adjusting his gloves, Seo emphasizes that he does not understand all these things from another world, but one thing is certain: they are still human. Elsewhere, a fallen man screams for help while being robbed by another wielding a sword. During the crime, Seo continues his reasoning, saying that whether in this world or another, arresting people who refuse to act as they should is a police officer's only mission. Suddenly, he appears behind the criminal and says he will arrest him for robbery, assault, and attempted murder. Grabbing the thug by the arm, Seo warns that he will be violent if he resists, and asks what he intends to do. Terrified by the detective's brutality and size, the man, nearly soiling himself with fear, immediately surrenders. Seo takes him to the police vehicle. Beside him, Dushik comments that the laws of the land no longer hold meaning, and that they should work together to become the kings of the city, as it would be easy with Choi's help. The detective smirks slightly and responds that this is why he keeps Dushik around. He is the most dangerous man in the city. Reflecting, Seo admits that he would have agreed with that proposal not long ago. However, he still cannot predict what Choi is scheming by turning himself in publicly just one day after the mission began. Suddenly, Dushik notices something strange and becomes alert. With a smile, he tells the detective that they will really be busy from that moment on, prompting Seo to ask why. Dushik explains that with Choi in custody, it is a perfect opportunity for people to take action, and the city will plunge into complete chaos. He asks if that was not exactly what Choi had planned all along. Annoyed, Seo points a finger at Dushik and says he has already warned that Choi is a good guy. Dushik agrees, saying that what Choi wants is for people to unite. Seo starts pondering what will happen next, deducing that as soon as the next mission begins, people will likely hide from the protagonist again. Inside the cell, Choi is sitting, observing the book of Krasina. He comments that it is now just a battle of patience. The system displays that his remaining stamina is at 92%, with 2,352 sacrifices of sovereignty, and the Demon King's punishment is in progress. The system indicates that the Demon King is displeased and demands more sacrifices. Suddenly, an item appears: the tail hair thread of the Monkey King, capable of creating an alter ego of the user. Choi uses the item and closes his eyes. The item takes effect, creating a clone of him. The protagonist instructs the clone to do a good job and last as long as possible without getting caught. He is under the effect of the Cloak of Ethereal Transition, a magical scientific creation that allows him to escape the interference of the material world. Choi then leaves the cell, leaving only the clone behind. Soon, a police officer arrives, asking why he is taking so long and ordering him to leave immediately. The clone turns around with a malevolent expression, terrifying the officer, who asks if he intends to turn him into a sacrifice of sovereignty. With 4 more guards providing backup, he says they are determined to use force regardless of what Choi does, so he can try his best. The protagonist starts walking, keeping the officers on alert. With a smile, he says he will go to the special isolation field they prepared for him because he wants to sleep. Outside, the Imperial Griffin senses something and begins to fly slightly. One of the officers, watching the scene, asks why the bird suddenly took off, while another comments that he should have taken a photo. In the sky, the protagonist flies with the Griffin while interacting with the system. He notices that the citizens have begun to move and comments that Stage 1 was a success. Looking at the book, on the page listing the treasures in the jungle sector, he says he will proceed to the next stage. After 4 days of mission, the citizens were divided into 2 categories: the externals, who went outside the city to find treasures, and the internals, responsible for what happened inside the city. Each person could freely choose their role. As a result, people interacted in the chat, some looking for external healers, others recruiting internals, and so on. Citizens without combat skills found their own ways to survive, and since then, the mission seemed to be running smoothly. At the jungle sector's outpost, formerly a goblin village, on the balcony of one of the buildings, Quan reflected on having finished an outpost of that size in less than 2 days. Observing the construction, he concluded that the humans of this version of another world were somewhat terrifying. He thought that if those powerful people cooperated, they could have completed the mission easily. Kwon recalled when Kim said that the city's atmosphere was tense, pointing out the increase in treasure-related crimes. Even with the police doing their best, it was still difficult since they lacked enough officers and equipment. Kwon asked if the army should act at that moment, but the commander replied no, as it would be dangerous. He explained that in human history, it had never been a good idea for the army to take on the police's role. Until the police officially requested help, the army would only carry out its own duties, and even if a request for assistance arose, they would only support the police without taking over public order. After recalling the conversation, Kwon became pensive for a moment and commented that even with the world changing, humans did not change, and that was troubling. Meanwhile, in the city, in a dark alley, a man writhed in pain, seemingly possessed. The attacker used some kind of magical power and commented on the type of poison he was applying. He possessed an abandoned magic pearl, a mythical class orb vomited by an emoji that had been training hard before transforming into a dragon. This equipment could evolve, growing stronger with use, and was capable of producing and manipulating a variety of poisons. After stopping his attack, the man on the ground struggled to breathe, but the assailant, with a demonic expression, said he had no intention of killing him yet. This man kept all his information private, including level, name, and class. Raising his hand, he said he still had many poison combinations to test. Desperate, the man begged him to stop, offering all the treasures he had. The poison wielder replied that this was what adults always said: experience is the greatest treasure. He launched another attack, terrifying the man, who saw the poison take the shape of a monster. In the blink of an eye, his life was taken. Suddenly, Detective Seo arrived, punching the air and dispersing the poison. Looking at the scene, he asked if that had been some kind of chemical attack and commented, "I'm sure the report was made in this area." Dushik remarked that it was quite a convenient weapon. Unexpectedly, the two noticed something unusual. The man who had been attacked was on the ground but still alive. Dushik approached and said it was interesting because they hadn't even touched the treasure. Seo added that the man wasn't even dead. Observing the situation, he said it was impossible to determine whether it had been done by a single person or a group. Looking at a pile of bodies before them, Seo concluded that something very dangerous had emerged. Dushik commented that after the great demon king Choi disappeared, another unknown king had appeared in the shadows and asked if that was really the case. As paramedics removed the bodies, Seo stated once again that the protagonist was not a bad person, but also acknowledged that all of this had started because of him, surprising Dushik, who smiled upon seeing Seo finally agree. The detective said he needed to have a deep conversation with Choi. His colleague asked if he thought Choi would reveal his thoughts, and Seo replied no, but that he needed to question those around him. Elsewhere, the protagonist spat on the ground, and scratching his nose, wondered if he had caught a cold. Suddenly, the system reported that the God of Gold's satisfaction level was at 6.74%. He commented that it was not a high value, even considering the treasures still being evaluated. Flying over the desert sector with a sack full of items, he concluded there was nothing he could do. Suddenly, a tornado formed in the desert, but it was just the Emperor Griffin landing, completely exhausted after carrying the sack. Choi became excited about finally arriving. The bird released the protagonist along with the sack of items and began flying away, while he thanked it for the hard work, saying he would be back soon and that the griffin could rest for a while. After falling to the ground, the protagonist heads straight for the bag and, upon passing by a giant mountain of treasures, concludes that he has already taken all the valuable items. He walks until he finds a giant being devouring the treasures. Choi says that it should eat a lot and fatten up quickly, calling it my own god of gold. This being is a baby god of gold, still young, who needs love and care. At the military outpost, Woojin, Minwoo, and Kwang-soo almost cry upon hearing that Kwon is leaving to make a statement about Choi. Minwoo tells the commander they can handle the rest, but Kwon asks them not to be dramatic. Moments later, he leaves in a military vehicle while the three soldiers, relieved, ask him to bring back snacks and ice cream. They watch the vehicle drive away, and seeing that Kwon is already gone, start celebrating, saying that they have finally reached their break time. As they dance and enjoy themselves, they fail to notice that they are being watched. The observer is Sergeant Park Seong-kyu, arms crossed, reflecting that it is acceptable to have a day off since the dungeon raid is approaching, and it will be good to rest. Walking toward the three excited soldiers, he thinks that he is more worried about Commander Kwon because he is on his own. While the soldiers talk about bringing beer to the outpost, Park concludes that he cannot simply leave those idiots alone, and, for that reason, cannot accompany Kwon. Elsewhere, an elf prepares magic with his fingers and unexpectedly launches multiple attacks at the protagonist. The elf is actually Master Jack, who knocks Choi down with his attacks and comments that he has struck his pressure points, which should reduce the pain. Choi quickly gets up and thanks the goblin, but Jack explains that this only reduces the pain, not eliminates it. Choi responds that it is enough. The protagonist thinks that Jack has accepted the fact that he has become one of the 4 sovereign masters, as if he were already used to this kind of situation. Even with many questions in mind, he decides to ask them later, once the situation stabilizes. For now, with Sergeant Kwon out of the city, it is the perfect moment to invade empty houses in the jungle sector. On the way back to the city, Kwon notices something but remains silent. The soldier driving asks if something is wrong. Kwon grabs his weapon and orders the driver to turn the vehicle around, leaving him even more confused. Kwon concludes that it is an ambush. Attacks begin raining down from the sky toward the car, but the driver quickly dodges them. One of the attackers drinks a mana potion and urges them to continue the attack, while another fires with magic wands. This makes the sergeant wonder if they are crazy for attacking the military, as it would be chaos if they had to retaliate against civilians. Kwon asks the driver if he can escape until they can get reinforcements. The soldier confirms and makes a sharp turn, skidding as he dodges the attacks. Amidst the chaos, Kwon reflects that the crime rate is worse than he imagined. He realizes that the strongest combatants are out of the city, and only police officers and non-combatant civilians have been left to defend it. Because the city is the best environment for criminals, and if some really strong villains were to appear now, the city would become the most dangerous area of all in the blink of an eye. While the poison guy was preparing an attack on the vehicle from above, the driver warned Kwon that something clearly very dangerous was approaching them. Quickly, that immense power began following the car, which accelerated even more to escape. Simultaneously, elsewhere, there was a green monster with a furious look. It was the Abyss Lizard Man, difficulty level 3, with greatly enhanced stats when in the demonic dimension. He fought against the protagonist, who managed to dodge an attack. Several others of the same species tried to take down Choi, who dodged as best he could and drew his sword. He struck the ground, creating an explosion that instantly wiped out all of them. After the strike, he commented that Master Goblin Jack's trick with pressure points was really great, as he now felt much lighter. Soon, Jack approached and asked him not to overexert himself, stating that the aura of that place was similar to that of the demonic dimension, where all demons were stronger. They were in the underground city of the Lizardmen, Taklodom, a city that led to the demonic dimension, enhancing the abilities of monsters and demons. This made the protagonist reflect. The Demon King was also a demon, so his powers would also be enhanced, and the Demon King's punishment would become even stronger. He commented that he wanted to hurry and get out of there with the treasure, as he already had enough. Showing a green mask, he said that the important part was not to satisfy the god of gold, and that this was just the easiest way to complete the mission. Jack pointed out that, in this way, Choi would also get a small number of rewards, but what the protagonist really wanted was to obtain as many rewards as possible. The chaos in the city was now part of his plan to achieve this goal. Quickly, the poison cloud began engulfing the vehicle until it completely surrounded it. Inside the car, the driver was in shock upon realizing they were covered by that cloud, while Kwon observed an object in his hands. He remembered when he received a promotion reward, and upon asking what it was, Kim Song explained that it was a gift for his promotion. He had obtained it as a reward in a mission but believed Kwon would make better use of the item, emphasizing that he had already given good equipment to the sergeant's subordinates as well. Kwon carefully observed the box and, even after picking it up, remained silent, which led the commander to ask if he needed anything else. He replied, somewhat awkwardly, that he just couldn't get used to such a well-funded army. The item Kwon received was an accessory called Momentary Shelter. When used, it created a safe area with a range of 3 meters and a duration of 3 minutes, although this duration could decrease depending on the surrounding environment. By using the accessory, they managed to protect themselves from all the poison by creating a barrier. The sergeant asked the driver to stop, as acting rashly could lead to an accident. Before the driver could say anything, the poisonous villain jumped onto the hood of the car and, with a smile, greeted the soldiers. Kwon remained calm and said that he wanted to speak with his leader because lackeys had nothing to do with this, surprising the villain. Smiling, the villain replied that the sergeant was good at offending and that he liked him, which made Kwon thoughtful. Then, the poison user slammed his hand on the windshield and said that he himself was the leader and had no intention of listening to anything the sergeant had to say. He ordered Kwon to just listen and obey what he said. Releasing poison from the venomous orb, the villain emphasized that they had better do as he commanded unless they wanted to end up 6 feet underground. Then, the villain began spreading the poison rapidly, and it spread throughout the city. The driver, desperate, grabbed Quan and said that everything was melting, but the sergeant remained calm, merely wondering whether it was a corrosive mist or some kind of poison. Even without knowing exactly what it is, he realizes that it has a wide area of effect and is deadly, and seeing people melting and writhing in agony on the streets, he deduces that it could be a lethal weapon if things go wrong. But with the artifact in hand, he thinks that for now, they should only worry about their own survival. Then, he says he can surrender if the villain listens to one condition and asks the venomous one to volunteer to become his subordinate, as he apparently isn't in the best mental state, and he will make him more human. Those words leave Shadow extremely confused, and with a malicious smile, he says that Mr. Soldier has crossed the line. This makes the driver even more desperate, and crying, he asks why Quan keeps doing this. Suddenly, the villain notices something approaching, and before he can react, he is thrown far away along with all the mist in a single strike from Detective Seo, creating an impressive vortex around the vehicle. This enrages the villain, who wonders if he played around too much, realizing he can't control the mist due to the strong wind. Even without knowing who did it, he believes that those abilities compared to his are useless. He possesses a heroic-rank giant-slaying slingshot, made by a little boy who took down a giant and reinforced the slingshot with the monster's bones and tendons. He then creates a poison ball with the orb and uses it as ammunition for the slingshot, aiming at the vehicle. He fires the projectile, and when Seo notices, he jokes that the slingshot is a child's weapon, while the sergeant tries to push him, managing to dodge the shot at the last moment. With the fall from the push, the vortex dissipates, and the poisonous projectile begins releasing the toxin instantly upon hitting the ground. The two get up, and Seo says they can continue in the car and meet later after capturing that criminal. But Quan warns that the enemy is not alone, and more of his accomplices should arrive soon. The detective retorts, saying that a police officer can't run ahead of a criminal, and Quan responds by saying he should consider it a strategic retreat. Seo then says that if they retreat now, there will be more victims, but the sergeant counters by saying it would be the same if he were eliminated now. While the two argued, the driver, noticing something, calls out to them and warns that the criminal had left. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, explosions were occurring, and after Hyeju defeated two criminals, they asked why she was there, as she should be in the outer area. But Hyeju, with her powerful spear, simply remained silent for a moment, looking at them. Quickly they started running, and one of them asked about the quota they would get, to which the other replied that they would never be able to do anything with Hyeju facing them. But Hyeju shouted for them to stop running, as she only wanted to talk. Then, one of them threw a Molotov cocktail, which left Hyeju confused, wondering if it was a beer bottle. A nearby citizen warned that it was poisonous, and that if it broke, it would be a problem. With an extremely precise movement, she managed to prevent the bottle from touching the ground using her spear, and with great skill, kicked the object upwards and caught it in midair, relieving the man. The man then said it was a relief that she was still in the city, and she asked who those who ran away were. The two were in a completely chaotic scene, with debris everywhere, and the man said he didn't know who they were either, as he was used to common thieves but had never seen anything as organized as those guys. While Hyeju analyzed the bottle, the old man commented that many people were suffering due to a seemingly deadly poison, for which most antidotes did not work. Looking at some treasure crates, he remarked that they had narrowly avoided losing all the treasure she had given to the citizens. Hyeju, saddened, recalled Jiwoo's words, saying that some might think people are easier to face than monsters, which is a lie. She then turns around and tells Uncle Wongi that for now, they should pause the treasure hunt, leaving him surprised. She explains that something doesn't feel right, as if something bad is surrounding the city. Meanwhile, inside a building, the protagonist is being observed by Jiwoo, who begins to think about him. Holding a snack in hand, she wonders what Choi is doing by staging such a farce. She says that since Choi is not in the city, she doesn't need to be there either, because soon that city. Meanwhile, the protagonist, holding the book, reads that a great battle will begin soon. He starts walking toward the Goblin Master, who asks if he expected all of this to happen, and the protagonist responds that although he had envisioned chaos erupting in the city, he never expected someone so crazy to appear. Amid dozens of dismembered monsters on the ground, Jack says that Choi could easily eliminate the crazy guy, but he promptly replies that he can't do that, pointing out that he needs something even more chaotic. This makes the goblin reply that it's really hard to guess his thoughts, and with a smile, Choi says that Jack will understand everything soon. Upon reaching the gate to the deepest area of Takladam, Choi says that for now, they will just clear the dungeon. The gate opens and inside a lizard man notices them and comments that it has been a while since a human has descended this deep. Sitting on a throne, the monster welcomes them to his city. This is the Demon King of Investigation, Takloa, rated at difficulty level 4. He is the Demon King who resides at the edge of the abyss and enjoys watching mortals suffer for a long time. The protagonist then steps forward and, drawing his sword, asks if Takloa knows the Demon King Krasina. The question irritates the monster, who says he really doesn't like the tone of voice he is using. Choi simply comments that that's a shame, and, charging at the gigantic monster, says that if he didn't like the tone of voice, he will hate his attitude even more. But before he could reach him, Choi collides with an unexpectedly created barrier. The monster then says he is not in the mood to fight and hurls everything in front of him, stating that such an attitude is truly despicable. Even though he is thrown far away, the protagonist manages to steady himself and realizes that it is a magical barrier that neutralizes all physical damage, a spell that instantly cancels high-level magic. He reflects that Takloa is a mage-type demon king, completely different from the warrior-type Katumbaba. He is the polar opposite of 2nd Lieutenant Kwan's group, which focuses on physical damage. If Kwan had brought his platoon there, they would have been wiped out in the blink of an eye. Without hesitation, Jack and Choi charge forward with full force, and upon seeing that the monster was attacking Jack with magic, Choi notices that there are countless other dangers around besides Takloa, such as cursed items and monsters infected by the plague. He decides to eliminate all the other dangers first and reset the difficulty level throughout the area. Choi then draws an absurdly powerful axe wrapped in chains, the legendary grade axe Musculus, which ascended to the rank of gods due to pushing the body to its extreme limits. Sensing the danger, Taklo quickly creates multiple magical barriers, but the protagonist, wielding the axe that converts all physical attack power into magical power, advances to strike, thinking that he will turn this into an entry-level intern difficulty for the other citizens. He then strikes, creating a colossal explosion that would make even supernovas jealous. Meanwhile, at the police station, inside the meeting room, Detective Co introduces himself, emphasizing that he is from the Homicide Division. In a meeting with Hyeju and Kwan, he explains that he called them there because of Choi Yul, but the situation has changed since a crazy guy appeared in the city, and for now, he will refer to him as Imugi. Dushik adds that they need to capture this Imugi guy, but currently, it is impossible with just police force alone. Snapping his fingers, the detective emphasizes that he is proposing a joint operation between the military, the police, and capable citizens. Hyeju gets excited and immediately agrees since the situation is getting very dangerous, but Kwan remains silent. He thinks that it would just be a fight between citizens, something irrelevant to the mission, and the longer it lasts, the worse it will get. Even if they win the battle, if the mission fails, everyone will end up in the same pit. Moreover, the fact that they started the mission knowing this truth means they are confident in winning not only the fight happening in the city, but also the battle against Choi Yul. Meanwhile, in the deepest area of Taklodome, Takloa says there have been countless summons, and that based on them, he has incinerated numerous cities, bringing suffering and extermination to countless people. With a severe wound on his chest, he says that for a long time, no mortal could harm him, but thinking that there would be a mortal capable of cutting him down with just their power is unbelievable. Choi then says that this is the last chance, asking again if he knows the Demon King Krasina. Takloa retorts, asking if that question is not related to that mortal summons. This confuses the protagonist, so he asks if by summons, the monster is referring to missions. The Demon King confirms, explaining that they also receive missions based on their causes, and that these missions usually involve destroying mortals and things like that. He explains that some have different causes for the same summons, and that, just like mortals, these causes sometimes change. This information leaves the protagonist completely perplexed, and he asks if Takloa can reveal all of this, but the Demon King says it doesn't matter, because for the mortal who possesses the book, the more he knows, the faster he will meet his death. The protagonist gets irritated by the response and asks how Takloa knows about the damned book, but not Krasina. The Demon King dismisses it and, smiling, says it's a pity. Using powerful magic around him, Taklo states that he will not be able to witness the obvious devastation that will follow that book. This throws Choi into despair, who shouts for him to wait and asks what he knows, but Jack holds him back and warns that they need to get out of there immediately. Taklo begins to transform into an aura and comments that, just by seeing Choi in anguish, the end of that summons is not so bitter. The protagonist, desperate, begs him to wait. Suddenly, the ground above Taklodome starts trembling, and unexpectedly, the Demon King shoots up like a rocket. Cutting through the skies and passing near the Emperor Griffin, he says he will await the condemnation of Pawn Number 8, which will be induced by Choi. Quickly, the protagonist and Jack mount the griffin and leave. The goblin asks if he is okay, and Choi confirms but reflects that the more he learns, the closer his downfall approaches, and that book leads to clear devastation. Jack asks if Choi will gather more information, but he replies no, as Taklo is the only demon king in that mission. Either way, it is enough for him to know that there is a demon king who knows Krasina. Flying over 2 adventurers in the forest, he announces that they will now work on the original objective of adjusting the area's difficulty, and this must be completed within 3 days. This makes the goblin wonder if they will be able to survive until then, fearing for his apprentices. 3 days later, a police officer on the street shouts, pointing to the security area and saying that the Imugi gang is loose, so everyone must stay on the main road. In the hospital, a nurse warns that they are out of potions and antidotes, which angers the doctor because the victims, who should be from the missions, are actually victims of the fight among the population. Meanwhile, in the streets, Imugi's mist spreads everywhere, and the detective, along with Hyeju, is about to be attacked by it. They hear Imugi telling them to simply give up, as even 2 people using legendary class equipment would not be able to stop him. He talks about the deplorable state of the city, saying that even when that battle began, the bastards didn't care and only sought treasures. There are still those who hide and try to reap benefits, and all of this is happening because they have no leader, no absolute leader to guide the people. And the leader, obviously, is a position for the strongest person. Hearing the whole story, Hyeju shouts that the strongest person is Choi Yul, while the detective wonders if it's actually himself. Imugi, smiling, says that the fact the protagonist hasn't stepped forward yet must mean he lacks confidence in defeating him. He reflects that he can't wait for Choi to appear, so he can deliver the special gift he has prepared. Suddenly, gunshots begin striking the villain, but the projectiles don't even pierce Imugi. Inside a building, lurking, Quan reflects on how that creature possesses high density, strong enough to block the shots with automatic defense, and concludes that the more they fight against the venomous one, the more abilities he will acquire. Without wasting time, the villain begins attacking, launching a snake-shaped poison. But the sergeant manages to dodge in time and thinks that, at this rate of growth, they need to deal with Imugi quickly before it's too late. After the attack, the villain says that he is different from Choi because he can share points and items as much as needed, making completing missions much easier. What everyone needs to do now, according to him, is listen to what he's saying and, of course, accept his proposal. The detective wastes no time and, preparing a punch, says that if Imugi has time to think about stupid things like that, he should go out and find treasures. Immediately, he delivers a powerful punch that creates a wind shockwave, sending several of Imugi's subordinates flying. However, the villain is not hit, and pointing at the orb declares that such attacks no longer work on him, leaving Hyeju and Seo in shock. They are quickly surrounded by the mist, which takes the shape of vipers, forming a dense cloud of poison that engulfs them. However, Hyeju creates a magical barrier that keeps them protected. Noticing this, Imugi starts walking, emphasizing that they can no longer dispel the poison with fire or wind. After completely poisoning the 2, he says he will let the one who screams the most beautifully live. Hyeju struggles to endure the immense pressure, but begins to tire, while the villain, with a wicked smile, declares that the scream he wants to hear has already been decided. Suddenly, the barrier protecting them is destroyed, leaving them vulnerable and terrified. Hyeju starts to say that he should survive and that she would sacrifice herself, but Seo interrupts her. Already feeling the effects of the toxin, he says that, whether due to age or career, it would make more sense for her to survive. But Imugi appears out of nowhere, saying that makes no sense, and seeing the 2 completely intoxicated, he states that what he truly wants is, suddenly, something rushes past them at an absurd speed, dispersing the poison and pushing Imugi away. Covering his face, he asks who the bastard daring to do that is, just as Hyeju looks up and wonders who it is. None other than the Goblin Master Swordsman Jack, who, drawing his sword, says that his students are disappointing him because he thought they would be able to handle a third-rate opponent with that shitty little poison. This leaves the 2 completely shocked, utterly speechless, and even Imugi is confused, wondering why the guardian of the last pillar of the previous mission is still there. While Hyeju and Seo interact with the system, Jack says they need discipline, but since the time has come, he will postpone that for the next opportunity. The system was issuing an emergency notification. While a god of gold slept under a pile of treasures, the system informs that another god of gold has been found, a god ready to enter the group's hierarchy competition. As soon as he enters puberty, his resilience will be revealed to the citizens. The system also announces that the mission content has been altered, making everyone alert. It is announced that, from that moment on, Each person can choose which god of gold they wish to offer their treasure to. Until the mission ends, the god of gold who receives the most treasures will win. This makes everyone even more tense. The system continues, warning that the citizens of the winning god of gold will receive an incredible reward, while those of the losing god will receive nothing. This information makes Imugi even more furious. It is reported that the mission currently holds a value of 185,432 treasures, with 34,733 participants. In the isolation field of the sovereignty sacrifices, a short man comments that this must be Choi's doing, to which the man in the cap agrees, saying that he is the only damn person who would do something like this. They were also informed that the desert's god of gold holds a value of 38,552,895 in treasures, with only one participant. Even Imugi's associates become irritated upon realizing that Choi was responsible, calling him a damned piece of trash. Suddenly, Imugi notices something, and looking up, sees the protagonist riding a griffin. The protagonist considers that creating a villain to unite the city is a bit obvious, but it is the most decisive method. However, he cannot leave such a role in the hands of a protagonist syndrome patient who pretends to rely solely on his legendary class equipment. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a citizen says that there is no way Choi would have surrendered humbly, and another points out that physiognomy is part of science. That bastard has all the features of a villain. Outside the city, another citizen tells everyone to pack up because they will return to the city for now. Someone questions if he has lost his mind, considering Imugi is causing chaos there, but the first retorts that if they do nothing, they will lose everything to Choi again. In the city, the protagonist faces Imugi, who quickly prepares an attack and releases a terrifying amount of poison that engulfs Choi, leaving Hyeju and Seo worried as they see the toxic serpent attacking the protagonist. Preparing another attack with the slingshot, Imugi wonders how Choi dares to treat him like a puppet, deciding that he will exterminate him at all costs. He fires, aiming at the Emperor Griffin, but the griffin simply catches the projectile with its beak, leaving Imugi in disbelief. Watching the griffin absorb all the poison, he wonders what the hell kind of creature it is, capable of swallowing the special poison bomb he had prepared for Choi. He cannot believe that the bird was able to absorb all the toxin. Then, information appears stating that the griffin is an elite-class monster, whose primary diet consists of deadly poisonous monsters like the basilisk and hydra, and that it has poison resistance at the level of a boss monster. This leaves Imugi completely stunned, wondering how an elite monster cannot be considered a boss. He does not even notice the protagonist appearing right behind him until Choi asks if he is curious about why the toxin did not work. Surprising the villain, Choi points his finger and says he will give him homework to solve instead of threatening others. Without a second thought, he attacks Imugi with such power that it generates a shockwave spreading hundreds of meters, leaving Hyeju and the detective in shock. They worry but soon realize that Choi, the griffin, and the goblin master are all fine. Then, the protagonist loudly declares that he will monopolize the desert's god of gold himself, and if everyone offers treasures to this god of gold, he will offer them to the sovereignty sacrifice in all future missions. This leaves all the citizens furious, but Choi continues. With a terrifying smile, he says they should do their best to fight for the rest of the mission. Then, he flies away on the griffin, laughing maniacally. Hyeju, Kwan, and Seo remain completely silent for a moment before saying in unison, "He's terrible at acting." Thus, Choi continues his journey elsewhere, riding the griffin alongside Master Swordsman Jack. After some time in the city of Pawn 8, a treasure hunt mission is announced through an urgent meeting with the police and military alliance. On top of a bus, it is announced to the population that for the rest of the week, they need to accumulate more treasures than the desert's god of gold. Holding a microphone, Hyeju emphasizes that to achieve this, they will need everyone's cooperation. Detective Seo adds that although everyone knows Choi is the greatest calamity, they cannot simply remain paralyzed and incapable of taking action. He claims that the way to overcome calamities is the same as on Earth, by working together. Hyeju reinforces that this obvious approach has been the most reliable method humanity has used to overcome any calamity, regardless of the generation. With her flaming spear, she shouts that to defeat all these calamities, they will need to join forces. This excites the population, who become fervent and motivated by her speech to work together. Meanwhile, inside a cell, Imugi remains seated, staring at the orb in his hand, trembling with rage. Hours pass, and the next day, the guide for Mission 01, the city's alliance supply, begins. The first step is the nest, and by using hostile organisms and monsters on the ground as a foundation, it becomes easy to target monsters since their forces can be spotted with the naked eye. Although the value of the treasures is not high, sometimes it is possible to obtain something valuable. The second step of the guide is the dungeon, the generic term for structures, caves, or basements that cannot be fully seen with the naked eye. While the value of the treasures is often high, dungeons contain many variables, and due to the high level of danger, entering alone has become prohibited. It is recommended that military troops and trained outsiders cooperate when entering. After some time, the citizens load a truck with treasures, and Woongi asks if that is the last box, telling the young man to carry it quickly so they can leave. Then, the convoy departs. In the sky, monsters watch and prepare an attack. Soon, they begin to strike while the united humans fight to defend the convoy. A woman on defense asks them to protect the loot since they are already close to the city, causing the monsters to fly to evade the shots. At the city gate, while two men shoot at the monsters, a soldier asks for the gate to be opened as the vehicles are arriving. The third step of the guide is the evaluation center, a place where treasures are stored while being assessed. The army, along with the police and private security guards, positions itself to ensure security. One of the citizens obtains a legendary treasure called the Idol of a True God. It is a doll made in the shape of a god and has no special abilities. The man who obtained the item shouts in joy, celebrating his achievement. Meanwhile, writing on a board that calculates the difference between the items acquired by Choi and the citizens, someone observes that the gap is not narrowing at all. Worried, he begins to reflect that the jungle and the canyon are almost completely cleared, leaving only the desert where Choi is and the last map, which has not yet been explored due to the high risk. He comments that now it is possible. Elsewhere, observing a golden item on the table, the detective asks if it is related to Choi Yul, whom they arrested. Dushik comments that they were completely deceived by that item. Picking it up in his hands, he says that if the protagonist had taken the desert's god of gold from the beginning, the citizens would not have mobilized, since, until then, most people were afraid of him. Seo concludes by saying that Choi used himself as bait to make the citizens act. Dushik adds that he caused an outrage that surpassed the population's fear. This infuriates the detective, and after breaking the table with a punch, he says they cannot let this continue, because if Choi keeps using that method, no matter how the mission ends, he will become even more isolated from the city. The two remain silent for a moment, staring at the broken table, and Dushik thinks that now he understands what kind of person the protagonist is. He realizes that Choi does not just play the card in front of him. Instead, he holds all the cards while considering all the pieces on the board. That way, they must demand that the citizens unite and grow stronger, because Choi has undoubtedly prepared cards in case the citizens achieve victory. And it will not be an obvious card like joining forces and finding treasures. Meanwhile, in the middle of the forest, Jiwoo walks, searching for something. Observing a monument in front of her, she realizes that the mission to find treasures can also be carried out in that way, and thinks that this information could be sold for a very high price. At the same time elsewhere, a massive explosion causes a tornado. It is the last day of the treasure hunt mission, and the detective, with bloodshot eyes, tries to strike the protagonist. Currently, the desert's god of gold still holds a treasure value of 38,552,895, with only one participant remaining. While Seo desperately tries to hit Choi, he defends himself with absolute composure. Then, the detective triggers the windmill, launching the protagonist into the air. Watching him soar, Seo states that regardless of level, burden is a different story. Knowing that the city's god of gold has only 37,001,970 in treasure value, Hyeju also joins the battle against Choi, along with Imugi. The three simultaneously attempt to land a hit, attacking in every possible way and using everything they have, yet they still fail to land a single blow. Choi then counterattacks, throwing his sword with full force, but the Poison Master, using his orb, creates a massive shield that manages to stop the sword. Seeing that the remaining time for the mission's end is 24 minutes and 33 seconds, the protagonist feels relieved and emphasizes that there is not much time left. He steps onto the poison block and, looking at the trio attacking him, tells them to try harder, calling them the City Alliance. 4 days earlier, Hyeju had been surprised to discover Imugi's identity, as he was just an inexperienced high school student who had yet to grow out of his diapers. His name is Kang Seung-won, level 24. Seung-won, annoyed, says she is talking nonsense and that she can leave. If necessary, he would call her. But smiling, she says she cannot, as her job is to keep an eye on him. Seung-won begins to release the orb's toxin and, in a threatening tone, asks if she would be able to face him alone, reminding her that she had lost miserably before. But quickly, she throws her spear just millimeters from his head and argues that she is faster than his ability to activate that orb, asking if his body is the same as that of a normal human. Seungwon does not answer the question and comments that she must have heard about his subordinates, which she confirms, pointing out that they easily snitched on him, so he must not have been a very respected leader. The boy says he cannot blame the survival tactics of the weak who try to live by staying close to the strong, and that if he managed to escape and step on them again, those worms would tremble in fear once more, because that is how humans are. Mocking, Hyeju says she now understands, pointing out that he is going through 8th grade syndrome. Imugi then explains that the magic pearl is a mythical class item that is still in development until it was ruined by Choi. But once its development is completed and it reaches its rightful mythical class, not even Choi Yul will be able to stop it, which means that when the time comes, the city will be his. With a tear in her eye, Hyeju reflects that, without a doubt, if not for the protagonist, everyone would be in danger. But she wonders about the boy saying the item is not fully developed yet, making her question whether it is okay to leave him alone. Near the treasure appraisal center, while Jiwoo walks down the street, she hears a man asking another how it was to enter the dungeon, and the other replies that it was a close call, but they manage to win and think they will be able to face slightly larger dungeons as well. As people discuss receiving fines if they draw weapons in the city, Jiwoo passes unnoticed and comments that, in just a few days, that place has turned into a beautiful city full of fighting spirit. In that state, it will be difficult to sell the information at a good price, as it is easier to sell when everything is in chaos. Noticing she is receiving a call from a contact named Benefit, she remarks that, at times like these, connections are the best. On the other end of the line is Hyeju, who asks if she is safe because she was worried, which Jiwoo confirms. While Seungwon interacts with the system, Hyeju says on the phone that it is possible but that she is in the middle of something now, and will do that favor later. Jiwoo, thinking about the phone conversation, reflects that she only asked Hyeju to introduce someone to whom she could sell the information, but remembers that all the girl's contacts are big shots in the city. Meanwhile, inside a room, Kwon and Kim prepare for an interrogation, and the sergeant asks if it is really okay for Imugi to be there. The young man, already at the door of the room, sarcastically repeats the question, and cracking his neck, states that he himself called him because the boy is definitely an extraordinary force. In the meeting, everyone was present, and Kim Song points out that using Hyeju as a guard is a great waste, since they need to utilize all their forces at that moment. The detective, visibly irritated, asks if they are really going to trust that mad dog, but the policeman beside him, named Lee, asks him to calm down and just listen. Jiwoo then hands over the information she obtained on how to end the Gold God's mission. After analyzing it, Kim says that if the information she brought is true, they can eliminate the Gold God before he becomes an adult. And even though there is the extreme difficulty of having to get past Choi, he thinks it is worth trying. For this reason, he plans to use Imugi. Hearing that, the boy smiles, saying that in the end that city needs him, and therefore he would like to make a deal. Sometime later, on top of a destroyed building, the protagonist and Jack notice the tornado approaching. The master asks if they don't need to increase the sacrifices of sovereignty, which takes Choi by surprise. He emphasizes that the Demon King's punishment is still ongoing, but Choi disagrees, arguing that a large number of citizens need to earn rewards, and that the people he designated as sacrifices this time are those who, unfortunately, ended up in dangerous dungeons or headed toward cursed treasures. They were also people he needed to isolate before that mission. Soon, Jack notices something and, looking at whatever is approaching, says that the guests have arrived. In the truck heading toward them, the group is assembled, and Kwon warns that they have reached their destination, so they should prepare for battle. Soldiers in another truck also begin to ready themselves. The swordmaster, already standing, hears the protagonist telling him to calm down, as it is not yet time, because from the old days, the final stage has the old tradition of sending the weakest forward first. With that, he sends the Emperor Griffin to attack the group, and Hyeju promptly tries to defend against it with her spear until, out of nowhere, she and the detective are grabbed by Seungwon's dense poison cloud. With a sudden movement, he hurls them away, calling them bait. Hyeju asks what the boy is doing, and Seo says he had warned about that damn kid. They strike the griffin head-on, causing pain and disorientation to the beast. While the two fight the monster in the skies, Kwon and his men advance on the ground, with the sergeant ordering his troops to hide and, once they found a position, to open fire, which they quickly do. As the battle unfolds, Seungwon merely hides and calmly thinks that there is no reason to waste energy at that moment, as he is not the final target. And if everyone thinks they will use him to capture Choi Yul's Gold God, they are mistaken, because they are the ones being used. Away from the fight, Commander Kim Song observes through binoculars and comments that they would have liked to start with negotiations, but apparently, Choi has no intention of doing so. He then gets into the truck and orders the driver to start moving because the battle has already begun. He reflects that the plan to kill Choi's gold god was false. Even if that were to happen, they would obviously clear the mission. However, it was an impossible feat. The true objective of that plan was clearly to find treasures beyond the desert sector, the last sector. And when calculating the remaining time for the mission, instead of going back and forth multiple times, they needed to go in once and take as many treasures as possible. So, they needed to mobilize as many people as they could. As a result, they couldn't leave a bomb like Imugi inside the weakened city. That is why they used a false plan to subdue Choi's gold god and remove Imugi. After some time, Kim finally arrives. As he gets out of the vehicle and looks ahead, he asks if that is really the last sector, because in front of him stood the city from the original world. Then, he enters the city and, observing a family portrait, thinks that this is exactly what he had suspected. They were not the only ones summoned to that game. Although he had expected it, he confirms that humanity did not fall into ruin due to external beings, but was isolated and divided, eventually reaching its end after fighting among themselves. Kim approaches a chest, and, as he takes the treasure in his hands, he hears one of his men comment that those corpses have been dead for at least a year. He replies that, for the people of that city, the duration of the mission was years, while for them, it has been only weeks. The companion says that if that is the case, although the game started on the same day and time, they can hypothesize that the two cities experience different time flows. Hearing that, Kim is completely paralyzed, shocked, and listens as the companion explains that it's still a bit early to be sure, but if the hypothesis is correct, the players who created that game and summoned them are beings who can even manipulate time as they please. Meanwhile, in the desert, Hyeju and Seo fight against the griffin, attempting simultaneous attacks, until the detective tries a combination of jab, and uppercut, landing a direct hit and dealing damage to the beast, which becomes even more furious. But before the bird can retaliate, Hyeju prepares a finishing blow with her spear and, after apologizing to the griffin, delivers a powerful strike, creating a massive explosion that completely sets the monster ablaze. Watching this, Choi reflects that the Fang of Prominence and the Gauntlets of Fungbak are the highest-ranked items among legendary equipment, and, besides having high attack power, also grant additional stats to the user. That is why, even when they were at level 1, they were capable of possessing superhuman combat power. However, the downside is that most of their attacks are large-scale, which can cause significant collateral damage. To control the prominence and the power of Fungbak, they must utilize teamwork effectively to get accustomed to them, and to prepare for that, they would need veterans and team members experienced in cooperative play. After the griffin falls to the ground completely charred, it surprises Hyeju and Seo by beginning to rise despite its wounds. However, it is just Choi, congratulating them for passing the first stage. This enrages the detective, who shouts at Choi to stop, saying he is not there to seek the god of gold, but to save him before he becomes completely isolated from the city. This surprises the protagonist, and upon hearing that, he shows a slight smile. Then, crouching down and preparing to jump, he says that if that's the case, the detective can arrest him if he's talented enough, of course. He then leaps away, leaving only a trail and a cloud of dust behind. This infuriates Seo even more, while Hyeju begins to cry. But suddenly she is shocked upon noticing something, and immediately steps in front of the detective in a combat stance, successfully defending against a surprise attack that would have hit him directly, deflecting it with her spear. The attack came from the goblin master swordsman Jack, who, with his sword in hand, questions if the only one who reacted to the attack was an inexperienced disciple, pointing out that he will need to be careful not to accidentally eliminate all of them. Quan observes the goblin and recalls that he is the guardian of the pillar from the previous mission, a boss of greater difficulty than all the other pillar guardians. Hundreds of people had to attack for half a day just to capture a guardian who had lost all his combat power. Analyzing the scene with the trail of destruction left by Jack's attack, he wonders if they will be able to defeat a monster even stronger than them with their current numbers, and on top of that, without Imugi. Meanwhile, in the canyon sector, at the Emperor Griffin's nest, the protagonist places the monster in the nest, which immediately begins to heal, and thanks it for its hard work, telling it to rest now. He notes that thanks to its regeneration ability, it will be able to recover quickly. Then, he apologizes again for using him that way, and offers a refund for his hard work, displaying the Time Change Orb, a legendary class tool with the ability to change the weather within a small region, with the duration depending on the user's class, and also allowing the selection of the type of weather. Slightly, he uses the item under the nest, creating a storm around it, and says he will protect the nest until that mission is over. After that, Choi leaves the nest, moving at an absurd speed while recalling Seo's words, who said he had gone there to save him. He reflects that he already expected the strongest force in the current city, Detective Seo, to come there, but he never imagined he would say that. And although Choi can predict actions, it is apparently difficult to predict feelings. Then, he continues moving toward the battle. Meanwhile, Jack, atop the ruins, asks Hyeju and the detective if that is all they have. Hearing this, the detective thinks there are no answers and nothing they can do, as the goblin is simply a ridiculously OP monster. Hyeju then shouts, pleading for them to be allowed to pass. But Jack, with a cold look, says that if she wants to convince a martial artist, she must use martial arts. Suddenly, Kwon, with injuries on his face, approaches the girl and calls her to leave, as Choi is on his way. He points out that they still have a few days, and their opponent does not show an absolute intent to exterminate them there, so there is no need to rush, and they should devise a plan. Those words leave the two completely confused, unable to react. Moments later, a wind arises around the area. The protagonist appears, commenting that it ended faster than expected, and Jack opines that Kwon Jae-young has an impressive sense of judgment, explaining that he has the mind of a general, unlike a martial artist who acts before thinking. This makes Choi think that an invasion is not a system where one or two strong people can carry everything. Strategy and cooperation are necessary. So, they need to accumulate attack experience through that mission, and with that, they will have to share this experience with various groups. After all, they must avoid the monopoly of power at all times. Unexpectedly, Jack asks what Choi did with Imugi, and he replies that for now, he will just keep an eye on the boy and comments that he is going through the complicated period of adolescence. Simultaneously, Imugi, observing the detective's power, says that Seo's wind is just a gentle breeze, incapable of harming a cockroach, and if he gets through that storm, he will be able to kill the god of gold while everyone is distracted fighting Choi. Meanwhile, in the city center, Dushik hears a young man working on some equipment say that it really worked and questions how he figured it out. He responds that Choi does not strictly follow the mission's content, he just uses it to receive more rewards. So he tried to think exactly like Choi. Inside an item factory, with various people working, he concludes that instead of merely offering treasures, he increased their value as much as possible before offering them, and the results, as everyone can see, were a great success. Dushik wonders if they will really be able to use this method to surpass the value of the protagonist's treasures, and if the Desert Gold God's expedition team will succeed. He also questions whether, between the two, one of them represents the method where the citizens win, as Choi had thought. At the same time, in the treasure factory, the workers are in full swing, organizing items, recruiting welders, and managing the operation. One of the police officers working there informs Dushik that heroic class or higher items cannot be repaired, and he responds that there must certainly be equipment or items related to repairs, ordering the officer to find someone who possesses such an item. Another worker, a soldier, also reports that a sandstorm occurred in the desert sector, and they predict that the treasures will arrive at night, to which Dushik responds that they will install lights in the canyon sector and reduce the arrival time to the city. Immediately, the two bow, saying, "Yes, Sir Hyungnim," but after responding they become confused, wondering why they addressed him that way, since Hyungnim is a term used for gang leaders. Back in the desert, Seo hears Hyeju mention Dushik's name and asks why. Hyeju comments that, noticing Seo left the city to him, he must be quite strong, which the detective promptly confirms, emphasizing that resourcefulness is the correct way to describe him, and that is why he is more dangerous, which leaves Hyeju confused. While eating his instant noodles, the detective reflects that, even if the situation had not reached this point, he would not have left Dushik alone in the city. But there is nothing to be done, so, as they have always done, it is better to deal with one thing at a time. While he was lost in thought, Hyeju becomes outraged that he downed the cup noodles all at once. At the same time elsewhere, Imugi's poison is seen. Struggling, he tries to get through the sandstorm caused by Seo's power, but is thrown back by the force of the wind, which sends him flying far away. After being hurled, he gets up, covered in dirt, and wonders if the proficiency of the poison pearl is no longer increasing, which is strange since it should grow stronger the more he uses it. Meanwhile, the protagonist, reading the book, comments that even when given an opportunity, the poison kid fails to take advantage of it. Choi knows that Imugi cannot increase the pearl's proficiency just by hunting low-level mobs, as he needs to slowly take on stronger opponents. Until now, he has always been in hiding, and has only faced weak monsters or people. and as a result, his poison does not even work on elite monsters. At the same time, Seongwon wonders if the pearl had broken. The protagonist, smiling, says that he would have grown more if he had fought Hyeju, but to the boy's misfortune, he does not intend to tell him that, because for now, him being an immature villain is enough. Back to the battle in the desert, the master swordsman Jack makes a grand entrance with his sword, and suddenly a massive explosion merges with the sandstorm and Imugi's poison. While one of Kwan's men flips someone off, he calls out for Seo on the radio. The detective, fighting and creating powerful winds with his fists, simply ignores it, but Kwan's men shout that Seo is blocking their vision and open fire to try and divert attention. Out of nowhere, a missile is fired into the middle of the hurricane, and the sergeant, hiding from the imminent explosion, alerts his subordinates to brace for impact. A near-nuclear explosion erupts, devastating everything in its path. One of the soldiers, trying to celebrate by saying they finally did it, is scolded by his companion, who warns that such a phrase is forbidden. As the smoke clears, Hyeju can be seen, noticeably injured amid the chaos, but she is being held by the neck by Jack. He comments that it was a fabulous cooperation but still not good enough to break through his tiger god aura. This worries Kwan, who wonders if they are lacking firepower. The goblin, releasing Hyeju, says that with everything that has been done, he can now approve, and tells Hyeju that she can move forward, as she has apparently learned the fighting style of that world. But before she leaves, he calls her again, and says that collaborating when one doesn't have enough strength is also a path, leaving her surprised by those words. The goblin explains that since she is his disciple, she needs to be able to sustain herself, and she promises him that she will dedicate herself. Hearing that, the sergeant is confused, wondering why the gender is always different there. With the goblin's authorization, they advance into the desert and depart in a military vehicle, leaving Jack behind. On the way, Kwan ponders the word approve that the swordmaster used and wonders if he is testing or training them, and, if that is the case, what would happen if they received a failure. Some time later, they stop, and upon observing the massive sandstorm, Hyeju says it is difficult to go any farther. One of the sergeant's men reports seeing no sign of Choi or Imugi, but Kwan replies that Choi must know they are coming, so everyone should stay alert. He then asks Hyeju if she can jump over the tornado, which she promptly denies, commenting that it made no sense. While the two debate, Seo simply observes, his fist ready to try something. Out of nowhere, he crouches down and, concentrating energy into his fists, says that somehow he feels it will work, leaving both the sergeant and Hyeju puzzled, making her ask what exactly will work. Suddenly, he lifts his arms in a sudden motion with all his strength, creating a hole at the base of the tornado. Hyeju can't believe what she sees, and asks if he really scared away the tornado. And the sergeant explains that it is Fungbak, the god of the wind, and pondering the power that equipment holds, concludes that it has excellent performance. To everyone's surprise, they hear someone say that it was not possible just because Seo has Fungbak's gauntlet. It is the protagonist, who, in the middle of the storm, says that this means Officer Seo has begun to be recognized by Fungbak, leaving the three incredulous. Choi teleports, surprising Kwan. He then starts throwing some tickets, asking if they are ready to start the final stage. The tickets are free portal passes, allowing someone to teleport to a place they have been before and can only be used once by citizens. The ticket can also teleport citizens in sight without their permission. However, it cannot forcibly teleport those at a higher level than the user. Moments after using the item, Hyeju and Seo are teleported elsewhere. After looking around, the detective asks where they are, and Hyeju comments that it seems quite far from where they were before. Without them noticing, someone appears. It is Imugi, who, with a malevolent smile, comments that the bait is still alive. This leaves both warriors completely unresponsive, and Seongwon, looking closely, wonders what is wrong with them, as he notices that their energy has changed drastically in a single day. Hyeju then asks if he was also sent there by the protagonist, which confuses him, and he replies that he was there the moment he opened his eyes, realizing that it was Choi who brought him there. They are in an imposing building in the middle of the desert, and Seongwon questions whether the protagonist sent them there out of fear that they would capture the desert's gold god. But suddenly, the god himself appears, denying that assumption. Drawing his sword, which emits an intense energy, he says that since ancient times it has been a tradition for the final boss to be fought on a dedicated stage. Imugi wastes no time and rushes forward, asking why he doesn't just activate his second and third transformation modes right away. He attacks the protagonist, who dodges effortlessly, saying that he has good energy. Completely engulfed by the pearl's toxin, Imugi says that playing around with those loser nerds helped him learn that the more he hit them, the better their behavior became, to the point where, later on, their way of acting became incredible. After hearing this, Choi says that, as expected, he is a perfect villain. Meanwhile, still trapped in the sandstorm, Kwon says he lost contact with Hyeju, and one of his men points out that, based on the circumstances, they should assume she is in combat. As they talk, another soldier warns that they are running out of ammunition and supplies. Kwon's subordinate comments that he managed to get Imugi out of the city, so the plan is working, but the sergeant responds that there is still no certainty that they will defeat Choi in terms of treasure value and emphasizes that, even though it is a fake plan, they will carry it out to the end. They will find Hyeju's location and explore the surroundings. Kwon starts to think that with only 2 days left, they no longer have time to come up with a new plan or manpower to execute it, and all they can do is finish what they started. Meanwhile, on the stage of the final battle, Hyeju tries to defend herself from the protagonist's attacks, asking for a second so they can talk. He quickly steps back and says it's time for the traditional cliché scene with the final boss, asking if they should try to become careless by getting drunk on arrogance. Choi starts to say that the God of Gold has high resistance but almost no combat power, and they could defeat him in a second. If someone manages to hit him just once, they will be taken directly to the place where the God of Gold is. After hearing that, Hyeju and Seo reflect that Choi's acting is even worse than before, while Imugi, full of malice, says he accepts the challenge without hesitation. He asks again if just one hit is enough, and launches his attack, saying that a single blow won't be enough. Choi, surrounded by the poison, says that a scattered attack at maximum power is simple to deal with. He grabs his sword and throws it with full force, striking Imugi's forehead with the hilt brutally. The boy starts to fall from the impact, while Hyeju and Seo watch, amazed by the protagonist's precision. Seungwon collapses completely unconscious, and the sword lands, embedded in the sand beside him. The protagonist then asks what the other two want to do: rest, cooperate, or run to where the God of Gold is. Immediately, the two exchange a look and prepare for battle. Hyeju says that their reasons are completely different from Imugi's, but they also want to hit him with full force. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the doors of a truck close, and Uncle Wongi asks if Kim will really be okay. He responds that he already has too many treasures, so they can't take them all. Therefore, he should take the guards and citizens to the city while he goes with the volunteers and returns on foot with the remaining treasures. He emphasizes that if Wongi delivers the treasure and comes back to fetch them in the desert, they will save a lot of time. Thus, the trucks start to depart, and Kim Song, looking back, silently observes the ghost town and salutes before leaving. Meanwhile, in the desert, the battle remains intense. The detective, close to striking the protector, thinks he will finally succeed, but suddenly, he becomes frustrated upon realizing that the protector had teleported in the blink of an eye. Unexpectedly, the protagonist appears behind him, saying that he couldn't operate with such a gentle attack, and, provoking him, remarks that he must have forgotten, but he is stronger than the master swordsman Jack. The detective lands on the ground, asking if Choi is a dragonfly, but Hyeju explains that, thanks to the shoes the protagonist is wearing, they can't predict his movements, emphasizing that he definitely isn't even using all the strength he possesses. She then begins to reflect on the master's teachings and wonders what the best method is to fight someone stronger. But while thinking, someone persistently calls her on the radio. Then Kwon shouts her name, interrupting and startling Hyeju, but she quickly regains her composure and, apologizing, explains that she was so lost in thought that she couldn't respond. The sergeant then informs her that it's fine, and that thanks to her, he was able to determine her location. Watching the frantic fight between the protagonist and the detective, she informs him that she can't talk for long, and, according to Choi, the God of Gold, she starts calling for the sergeant, but he doesn't respond, making her wonder if he hung up, and whether she should call again, but she notices that she just received a message. Upon opening it, she reads Kwon's message saying that he will call again, and that she should just listen. Quickly, she answers the call and hears him saying that if Choi mentioned something about the God of Gold, there's a high chance it's part of his strategy, and, consequently, if she heard Choi's strategy, she is now a sacrifice of sovereignty. This information leaves Hyeju completely confused and incredulous. While watching Imugi deliriously lying on the ground saying he was going to exterminate the protagonist, she asks why they are the sacrifice. Kwon responds that she will find out later, and for now, should report the situation there. Hyeju quickly starts reporting, and Kwon writes down everything she says. After being informed about everything, he explains that he will create a plan and send it to her, so she can buy some more time, and ends the call, leaving her irritated. Looking ahead, she observes the detective's effort to try to land a hit, and ponders the sergeant's words about time and continuing to fight, making her question whether it's just a waste of energy. But with determination, she decides she will simply keep fighting. After some time at dusk, Seung-won finally regains consciousness, complaining of a headache, until looking ahead, he notices the other two collapsed, completely worn out, and comments that there's no way those legendary class losers could do anything. Quickly, he gets up and starts walking toward Choi, asking if he agrees. Unexpectedly, the protagonist says, "Abandoned magic pearl," catching Imugi's attention. Then he concludes by saying that it's necessary to think about how the pearl is developed, because if he simply uses it carelessly, the pearl will devour him. This deeply irritates the boy, who, attacking with venom, asks what the hell he is talking about. The protagonist, after dodging the attack with ease, exclaims that Seung-won was definitely warned, which unsettles him even more, making him tell Choi to go to hell. While the two fight, Hyeju begins to wake up, and on the phone, the sergeant calls the communications security sector and says he will report the plan he has. Currently, the city of the God of Gold has the treasure value at 15,991,370, with 97,741 participants. Amid the chaos, one of Kim's subordinates points behind him, trying to show something. Looking toward the horizon, he quickly notices the treasure truck arriving, with Uncle Woongi waving and smiling. After the treasures from the trucks are evaluated, the value is updated to 26,891,366, with 116,554 participants. On the last day of the mission to find treasures, the battle between the three warriors and the protagonist continues. The God of Gold in the desert has a treasure value of 38,552,895, obviously with only one participant, while the one in the city has 37,001,970 and 156,342 participants. Already exhausted from the fight, Seung-won says he is irritated, and that when he obtains points, he will certainly use them to level up. Upon being informed of the remaining time of 21 minutes and 32 seconds, the detective wastes no time and advances with determination. Slightly, he creates two tornadoes and shouts that this will be the final effort, but the protagonist moves too fast and easily dodges both tornadoes. Suddenly, Seo raises his hands and uses all the energy he has left, colliding the two tornadoes and turning them into a true storm, but once again, he fails to hit Choi. Balancing himself in the air, he notices that the effect of the acupuncture point is slowly wearing off, and that controlling the power he possesses is not easy. Seung-won gets excited by Seo's attitude and also charges forward, saying this will be his final blow, but he is soon taken by surprise as he sees the detective running past him. Turning around, he sees a boat stuck in the sand and a soldier firing a flare. Quickly, Seo reaches the soldier who fired the flare, startling him. Without wasting time, the two board the boat, with the detective warning him to hold on tight because they are leaving. Immediately, they begin to set sail using the wind force of Fungbak, and upon realizing this, Seung-won starts shouting, asking what trick he is pulling. Slightly, he launches an attack using poison in the shape of claws, which rapidly approaches the sailboat. The soldier piloting the boat looks confused and asks if they lost sight of Imugi, but the detective tells him to look ahead. Without noticing the claw gripping the boat, Seo uses all the strength of his Fungbak fists and warns that they don't have time, so they will go at full speed. The remaining mission time is 15 minutes and 3 seconds. In the midst of the fight, Choi slashes the tornado with his sword, dispersing all the wind. He asks if this will now be the final scene and wonders about Hyeju's role with Fungbak. Shouldn't she stay by his side? But upon noticing that she is holding a handful of potions, he wonders if those are all stamina recovery potions. Grabbing her spear, Hyeju says that in the first mission, he taught her the canine's hidden skill. Immediately, the protagonist remembers and ponders the ability to summon prominence. Then, she raises the spear and repeats the words the protagonist once said, "When your stamina is at 100%, stab yourself with the canine." Seeing this, the protagonist panics, shouting for her to wait, as that wasn't all. The most important condition had not been met. If she uses that ability now, she will. Without hesitation, Hyeju thrusts the spear into her own stomach, unleashing an absurd amount of energy. Watching the energy spread throughout the desert, the protagonist finishes the sentence, saying that she was going to die,